There is a planet that should not exist. It hangs in the void where an entire universe used to be, stitched together from the corpses of dead realities, held in place by the will of a single man who declared himself God. And on that planet, buried under layers of propaganda and enforced amnesia, a handful of people remember that everything used to be different. They remember a multiverse. They remember their homes. They remember that the man on the throne is not a god at all. He is Victor Von Doom, and he is terrified. That image, that patchwork world, ruled by a frightened tyrant, is the endpoint of a story that Marvel Comics has been telling across 3 decades, 3 separate events, and hundreds of issues. The story of Secret Wars. Not just a crossover, not just a marketing exercise, not just a fight between heroes and villains on an alien planet. Secret Wars is the story of what happens when omnipotence meets desire, when cosmic power meets human insecurity, and when the Marvel Universe asks its most dangerous question: what would you do if you could have anything? Welcome to Quiet Marvel. Get comfortable, settle in, turn the lights down low. This one is going to take a while, because we are going to walk through the entire history of Secret Wars, from its origins as a toy commercial in 1984 to its culmination as one of the most ambitious narrative achievements in superhero comics. And if you have not subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these long explorations. Let us get into it. To understand Secret Wars, you need to understand where it came from. And where it came from is frankly absurd. In 1984, Marvel Comics was approached by Mattel, the toy company, with a proposition. Mattel had lost the DC Comics license to Kenner, who were producing the Superpowers collection. Mattel wanted their own superhero toy line. They wanted Marvel, and they had 2 conditions. First, the toy line needed to be supported by a major crossover event in the comics. Second, based on focus group research with children aged 5 to 11, the event needed to include 2 specific words in its title. Those words were secret and wars. Children, it turned out, responded to secrecy and conflict above all other concepts. Jim Shooter, Marvel's editor-in-chief at the time, took this commercial mandate and did something remarkable with it. He created a 12-issue limited series running from May 1984 to April 1985 that would become one of the best-selling comic book events of its era. Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars. Written by Shooter himself, penciled by Mike Zeck, with inks by John Beatty, and contributions from several other artists across the run. 12 issues, 1 alien planet, every major hero and villain Marvel had to offer, and at its center, a question that would echo through every subsequent version of this story. What happens when an omnipotent being looks at humanity and cannot understand what it sees? The premise is deceptively simple. A cosmic entity known as the Beyonder, a being who constitutes the entirety of his own dimension, becomes fascinated by the superhumans of Earth. He cannot comprehend their motivations. He cannot understand desire itself, because when you are everything, wanting makes no sense. So he constructs an experiment. He takes pieces of other worlds and assembles them into a single planet, which he calls Battleworld. He reaches into the lives of Earth's most powerful beings and transports them there without warning, without consent, without explanation. And then he speaks. 1 sentence. Slay your enemies and all that you desire shall be yours. That is the entire framework. Kill each other, win, get whatever you want. And the fascinating thing, the thing that separates this from every subsequent event comic that tried to replicate its success, is how immediately the characters reject that framework. They do not want to play the Beyonder's game. They want to go home. They want answers. They want to understand what they are dealing with. But the Beyonder does not care about their resistance. He has set the experiment in motion. Now he watches. The heroes transported to Battleworld represent the full breadth of Marvel's roster in 1984. The Avengers are there. Captain America, Thor, the Wasp, Captain Marvel in her Monica Rambeau incarnation, Hawkeye, She-Hulk, and Iron Man, though it is Jim Rhodes inside the armor, not Tony Stark. The Fantastic Four contribute 3 of their 4 members, Mr. Fantastic, the Human Torch, and the Thing. The X-Men arrive as a unit. Professor X, Cyclops, Storm, Wolverine, Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Rogue. with Lockheed the Dragon tagging along. Spider-Man comes alone, as Spider-Man always does. And then there is Magneto, placed among the heroes by the Beyonder, which immediately creates tension that will drive the first several issues of the series. The villains are equally formidable. Doctor Doom, naturally, leading a coalition of Dr. Octopus, the Absorbing Man, the Enchantress, Kang the Conqueror, Claw, the Lizard, Ultron, the Wrecking Crew, and the Molecule Man. Two new characters are introduced here as well. Titania and Volcana, women empowered by Doctor Doom using Battleworld's alien technology, created specifically for this series and the toy line it supported. And then there is Galactus, neither hero nor villain, simply present. An elemental force that both sides eye with appropriate terror, wondering when the Devourer of Worlds will decide that Battleworld looks appetizing. The first issue establishes the playing field. The heroes appear on a massive construct in space, looking down at the patchwork planet below. The villains appear on a separate construct. Both groups watch as the Beyonder assembles Battleworld from the fragments of destroyed worlds, ripping a suburb from Denver, Colorado, and dropping it onto the planetary surface alongside alien landscapes. The Beyonder speaks his command, and then there is silence. No further instructions, no rules, no referee. Just two armies on an alien world with an omnipotent voyeur watching from beyond. What follows across 12 issues is not the straightforward battle royale that the premise suggests. The story fragments into subplots, alliances, betrayals, and character studies that give Secret Wars its lasting texture. Magneto, rejected by the heroes who refuse to trust him despite the Beyonder's placement, retreats to his own fortress. The X-Men, witnessing the other heroes' hostility toward their fellow mutant, consider breaking away from the coalition entirely. The Molecule Man, a villain whose power to manipulate all matter makes him arguably the most dangerous person on Battleworld, falls in love with Volcana and begins questioning whether villainy is what he actually wants. And Dr. Doom. Victor Von Doom does what Victor Von Doom always does. He ignores the game everyone else is playing and invents his own. Issue 4 contains one of the most iconic single images in Marvel Comics history. The Molecule Man, goaded on by Volcana, drops an entire mountain range onto the assembled heroes. Not a boulder, not a building. A mountain range, estimated at 150 billion tons of rock and earth, falling on the people who are supposed to save the universe. Everyone is trapped. Everyone is dying. And then the Hulk, positioned beneath the falling mass, catches it. He holds 150 billion tons above his head, while his legs buckle and his body screams, and Reed Richards frantically reworks Iron Man's armor into a device powerful enough to blast an escape route through the mountainside. It is the single greatest feat of strength in the Hulk's published history to that point, and it establishes something important. On Battleworld, the stakes are physical in a way that superhero comics rarely allow. People can die here. The rules of status quo do not apply. If this story is pulling you in, subscribing goes a long way toward keeping these deep dives coming. We appreciate every one of you. The true story of the 1984 Secret Wars is not the war between heroes and villains. It is the war between Doctor Doom and the Beyonder. Everything else, every battle, every subplot, every alliance and betrayal, is a distraction from the real narrative. Doom's methodical, patient, ultimately successful campaign to steal the power of a god. This is what makes Victor Von Doom the most compelling character in Marvel Comics. He is on a planet full of beings who can lift mountains and fire energy blasts and manipulate the weather, and none of that interests him. He looks at the omnipotent being running this experiment and thinks, I will take what you have. Not because he needs it, not because he has a plan for it, because it exists and it is not his, and that is intolerable. Doom begins his campaign early, studying Galactus, studying the technology of Battleworld, studying the Beyonder's interactions with reality. While the heroes and villains fight each other in increasingly complicated configurations, while Colossus falls in love with an alien healer named Zaji, while the Thing discovers he can shift between his rock form and his human form on this world, while Spider-Man finds a machine that produces what he thinks is a new costume, Doom is working, always watching, always planning. The alien machine that Spider-Man discovers deserves its own examination. This is issue 8, published in December of 1984. Spider-Man's costume has been damaged in battle, and he finds what he believes is a fabric replicator. He activates it. A black sphere emerges, engulfs him, and forms into a sleek black costume that responds to his thoughts, that can generate its own webbing, that seems to enhance his abilities. It is, of course, not a costume at all. It is a living organism, a symbiote, an alien creature that bonds with its host and feeds on their emotions. Spider-Man will not learn this until much later, but this moment, this single scene of a tired hero looking for new clothes on an alien planet, will eventually produce Venom, one of the most popular characters in Marvel's entire catalog, one of the most commercially successful villains ever created, born from a misunderstanding in a toy tie-in crossover. The contingency of it is staggering. But back to Doom. By issue 10, he is ready. He has fashioned lenses from slices of Claw's solidified sound body. He has studied Galactus's ship, the vessel that channels the power cosmic. He has prepared a device capable of absorbing energy on a scale that should not be possible. And he makes his move. He attacks Galactus directly, not to defeat him, but to drain him. To use the World Devourer as a conduit, a battery, a stepping stone to the Beyonder himself. The Beyonder responds. He reduces Doom to scattered atoms, begins probing his consciousness, examining his memories, trying to understand the incredible willpower that would drive a mortal to attack a god. And in that moment of examination, in that instant where the Beyonder is focused entirely on understanding Doom's mind, Doom activates his device. He absorbs the Beyonder's power. All of it. Every particle of omnipotence that constituted an entire dimension of reality flows into Victor Von Doom. He rises. He speaks, two evils have come to an end. The Beyonder is no more. And Doom, as he was, has been reborn. Think about what that means. A man driven by ego and brilliance and an absolute refusal to accept any authority above his own has just become the most powerful being in existence. And the first thing he does is not reshape the universe. The first thing he does is declare that his old self is dead. That is not the behavior of someone who wanted power for a specific purpose. That is the behavior of someone who wanted power because its absence was an insult to his self-image. Issues 11 and 12 chronicle the aftermath of Doom's apotheosis. He kills the heroes, all of them, casually, effortlessly, with a thought. Then he resurrects them. Then he kills them again. He cannot decide what to do with omnipotence, because omnipotence was never the point. The acquisition was the point. The proof of superiority was the point. Now that he has it, he is lost. Claw, who has been reduced to a servile, half-mad creature throughout the series, begins whispering to Doom, exploiting his self-doubt, asking questions that omnipotence cannot answer. And Doom, consumed by his own psychological fractures, loses control. The Beyonder, it turns out, was never truly destroyed. He hid himself inside Claw's fractured mind, waiting for Doom's inevitable failure of will. The power flows back. The experiment ends. The heroes are returned to Earth. The status quo resumes. Except it does not. Not entirely. The Thing stays behind on Battleworld, discovering that something about the planet allows him to transform between his rock body and his human form. She-Hulk takes his place in the Fantastic Four. Colossus returns to Earth having fallen in love with someone other than Kitty Pryde, a betrayal that will haunt the X-Men books for years. And Spider-Man brings his new black costume home, unknowing that it is alive, unknowing that it is hungry, unknowing that it will eventually become the most commercially significant thing to emerge from this entire event. The 1984 Secret Wars sold enormously well, outpacing virtually any comic published in the preceding quarter-century. It proved that crossover events could drive sales across an entire publishing line. It demonstrated that readers would buy a series specifically because it promised to change the status quo, and it established a template that Marvel and DC would follow for the next 4 decades. The universe-shaking event, the impossible stakes, the promise that nothing will ever be the same. But the thing that makes it endure, the thing that separates it from the hundreds of crossover events that followed, is Doctor Doom. His arc across those 12 issues is the arc that will define Secret Wars in every incarnation. The brilliant mortal who steals the power of gods, who achieves everything he claimed to want, and who discovers that omnipotence reveals, rather than conceals, the emptiness at his center. That arc will repeat. It will deepen. It will become the central statement of the entire Secret Wars mythology. But in 1984, it appears for the first time, and it appears in the context of a toy commercial. That is comic books. That is the medium. Commerce and art, inseparable, each making the other possible. The success of Secret Wars demanded a sequel. In 1985, Marvel published Secret Wars 2, a 9-issue limited series that ran from July of 1985 to March of 1986. Once again written by Jim Shooter, now penciled by Al Milgrom. And where the original was a contained spectacle on an alien world, the sequel brought the Beyonder to Earth. The premise was philosophical. A being of infinite power attempts to understand finite existence. The execution was, by most critical accounts, deeply strange. The Beyonder arrives on Earth in human form. He gives himself a body, a face, a perm that was fashionable in 1985 and nothing else. He wears a white jumpsuit. He wanders through human society like a tourist in a world he owns but cannot comprehend. He eats food for the first time and experiences the biological processes that follow. He discovers money and gambling and desire and all the small hungers that define mortal life. He works for a mobster. He falls in love with Dazzler, who rejects him. He seeks companionship with Boom Boom, a young mutant runaway, only to find that connection eludes him there as well. He turns an entire Manhattan office building into gold because he can, because he does not understand why that would be disruptive. Secret Wars 2 crossed over with virtually every title Marvel published. It was, in commercial terms, the most ambitious crossover event attempted to that point. But the story it told was fundamentally a comedy of errors. The Beyonder is not a villain in this series. He is a child. An infinitely powerful child stumbling through a world he cannot parse, causing catastrophic damage through ignorance rather than malice. The question the series asks is genuine. If a being of unlimited power truly wanted to understand what it means to be alive, what it means to want things, what it means to exist as a separate entity rather than as the totality of everything, how would that process look? And the answer Secret Wars 2 provides is messy, embarrassing, dangerous, ultimately tragic. Because the Beyonder cannot find enlightenment. Doctor Strange tries to guide him toward it, encouraging him to seek understanding rather than causing chaos. But the Beyonder is constitutionally incapable of genuine limitation. He cannot actually experience desire because he can have anything. He cannot experience loss because nothing can be taken from him. He cannot experience connection because no one can meet him as an equal. Every attempt at understanding human existence fails because the preconditions for human existence, limitation and mortality and need, are things he cannot replicate. And so he decides to destroy everything. If he cannot understand the multiverse, he will unmake it. If desire cannot be experienced, he will eliminate all the beings who experience it. This is the tantrum of an omnipotent child, and it takes the combined effort of Earth's heroes, the Silver Surfer, and ultimately the Molecule Man to stop him. The Beyonder, in a last attempt to transform himself, begins a rebirthing process, entering a state of vulnerability. And in that moment, the Molecule Man strikes. The Beyonder dies. His energy disperses into a new universe, a pocket dimension born from his collapse. Secret Wars 2 is not remembered fondly. It is bloated, inconsistent, and frequently silly in ways that undermine its philosophical ambitions. But it establishes something crucial for the mythology: the Beyonder's relationship with mortality, his inability to accept limitation, his fascination with and ultimate rejection of finite existence. These themes will return, transformed and deepened, 3 decades later. The Beyonder's tragedy is that he wants to understand what it means to be human, but cannot accept the conditions that make humanity possible. He wants desire without need, connection without vulnerability, power without consequence. And that impossibility drives him to destruction. There is also Molecule Man, Owen Reese, a seemingly minor villain whose power to manipulate all molecular matter makes him, in terms of raw capability, one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe. In Secret Wars 2, he is the one who ultimately defeats the Beyonder. That is not an accident. That is a seed planted in 1986 that will not bloom until 2015, when Jonathan Hickman makes Owen Reese the literal foundation upon which all of reality rests. This is a good moment to subscribe if you have not already. It means more than you might think. The space between Secret Wars 2 in 1986 and Secret Wars in 2015 is nearly 30 years. In that time, the crossover event became the dominant commercial structure of superhero comics. Every year brought a new crisis, a new war, a new reshaping of the universe. The format that Secret Wars pioneered became routine, then exhausting, then reviled, then routine again. By the early 2010s, event fatigue was a genuine problem for the industry. Readers had been promised that nothing would ever be the same so many times that the promise itself had become meaningless. Into this environment walked Jonathan Hickman, a writer whose previous work on Fantastic Four and Secret Warriors had demonstrated a gift for long-form plotting, for stories that planted seeds dozens of issues before they bloomed, for treating the Marvel Universe as a system whose rules could be examined, tested, and broken. In 2012, Hickman took over both Avengers and New Avengers for Marvel, and he began telling a story that would take 3 years to reach its conclusion. A story about the death of everything. The concept was Incursions. In Hickman's framework, the multiverse was collapsing. Universes were crashing into each other, with the point of impact always being Earth. When two Earths collided, both universes died, unless one Earth was destroyed before the collision completed. Then the surviving universe got a reprieve, temporary. Another incursion would follow, and another, until eventually there would be nothing left. This was not a natural disaster. This was engineered. The Beyonders, reimagined here not as a single entity, but as a race of beings from beyond the multiverse, had set this destruction in motion. And their weapon was elegant, terrible, and deeply personal to the mythology of Secret Wars. Their weapon was Molecule Man. In Hickman's reconceptualization, the Beyonders created Owen Reese. Not just the Earth 616 version, but every version across every universe in the multiverse. An identical being in every reality, each one a bomb, set to detonate simultaneously, designed to destroy everything. The incursions were the countdown, the Molecule Men were the payload, and the entire multiverse was the target. Hickman revealed this slowly, across dozens of issues of New Avengers. His vehicle for exploration was the Illuminati, Marvel's secret council of geniuses, Reed Richards, Tony Stark, Stephen Strange, Namor, Black Panther, and Black Bolt. These men, the smartest and most powerful figures in the Marvel Universe, discovered the incursions and realized that stopping them required an impossible choice. To save their universe, they would need to destroy another Earth, to kill billions of people in another reality so that their own reality could survive. Think about that for a second. The moral framework of superhero comics is built on the principle that heroes save everyone, that there is always another way, that the good guys find solutions that do not require sacrificing the innocent. And Hickman's New Avengers systematically dismantled that principle. It showed what happens to good men when the only options are evil and extinction. It showed them breaking, one by one, under the weight of what they were willing to do. Black Panther and Namor destroyed a world. They used a weapon designed by the Illuminati, and they killed an alternate Earth to save their own. And that act shattered the group. Black Panther could not forgive himself. He could not forgive Namor. The Illuminati fractured, with some members choosing to accept the incursions as a natural end, and others fighting to survive at any cost. Steve Rogers discovered what they had been doing and declared war on Tony Stark. The Avengers split along lines of principle that could not be reconciled. This is the buildup. This is what made the 2015 Secret Wars possible. Not a sudden cosmic event that disrupts the status quo, but a slow, methodical deconstruction of the Marvel Universe's moral foundations. By the time the final incursion arrived, Every relationship in the Marvel Universe was fractured. Every alliance was broken. Every principle had been compromised. The heroes were not united. They were at war with each other. And then the multiverse ended. The first issue of Secret Wars, published in May of 2015, written by Jonathan Hickman and drawn by Esad Ribic, opens with the final incursion. Earth 616, the primary Marvel universe, and Earth 1610, the Ultimate Universe, are on a collision course. Both will die. There is no solution. There is no way out. There is only the attempt to survive. Reed Richards has built a life raft, a vessel designed to survive the destruction of a universe, carrying a handful of people into whatever comes after. The plan is desperate, improvised, almost certainly doomed. But it is all they have. Manifold, using his teleportation abilities, places key heroes aboard: Spider-Man, Star-Lord, Thor, Captain Marvel, and Cyclops, who has become the Phoenix once more. The raft launches. The universes collide. But there is a second raft. Built by the Cabal, the group of villains led by Namor who chose survival over morality: Thanos, Proxima Midnight, Corvus Glaive, the Black Swan, the Maker, the Ultimate Universe's evil Reed Richards. They stole the designs for the life raft and built their own. They launched alongside the heroes. And both rafts plunged into the void where reality used to be. Then nothing. Then 8 years. When the story resumes, the multiverse is gone. In its place stands Battleworld. Not the Battleworld of 1984, assembled by the Beyonder as an experimental arena. This Battleworld is something else entirely. It is the last surviving reality, a patchwork planet made from the fragments of dead universes, each fragment preserved as a domain with its own rules, its own history, its own version of familiar characters. And ruling over all of it, worshipped as God, feared as absolute law, is Victor Von Doom. This is where the 30-year arc of Secret Wars achieves its final form. In 1984, Doom stole the Beyonder's power and lost it within issues because his own psychology could not sustain omnipotence. In 2015, Doom stole the Beyonder's power and held it for 8 years. He did not lose control. He did not collapse under the weight of godhood. He built a world. He saved what could be saved from the dying multiverse. He became, by any functional measure, a god, and he is still not enough. That is the story. That is always the story with Doom. He has everything. He is worshipped. He is omnipotent. He created reality itself. And still, somewhere beneath the armor and the godhood and the absolute power, Victor Von Doom knows that Reed Richards would have done it better. The structure of 2015's Battleworld is important. Doom did not merely preserve fragments of reality. He ordered them. He created a society with laws, with a theology centered on himself, with enforcers called the Thor Corps, who patrol the domains wielding hammers and dispensing Doom's justice. He has a sheriff, Dr. Strange, who remembers the truth about what came before but serves Doom anyway because the alternative was oblivion. He has a wall, the shield, a massive barrier separating the ordered domains from the chaos beyond, where zombie hordes and Ultron drones and the annihilation wave press against civilization. The citizens of Battleworld do not remember the multiverse. Their memories have been rewritten. They believe Battleworld has always existed. They believe Doom has always been God. They believe the domains have always been separate, each with its own baron, each with its own version of history. Only a handful of people know the truth. Doom, Strange, the Molecule Man, hidden beneath Doom's castle, channeling the Beyonder's stolen power, keeping reality stable through his suffering. And then the life rafts are found. 8 years after the destruction of the multiverse, a group of Thors discovers the rafts, buried in a domain called Utopolis. The Cabal's raft opens first. Thanos and his allies emerge, immediately killing an elderly Thor and beginning their assault on Battleworld's order. Strange investigates. He finds the second raft, the Hero's Raft, and opens it. Spider-Man, Star-Lord, Thor, Captain Marvel, Cyclops. They emerge into a world they do not recognize, having experienced no time between the multiverse's death and this moment. Strange tells them the truth. He shows them what Battleworld is, he explains what Doom did, and he makes a choice that will cost him his life. When Doom arrives, demanding to know who these strangers are, demanding that Strange surrender them, Strange refuses. He uses his magic to scatter the heroes across Battleworld, hiding them in different domains, giving them time to understand their situation and plan. Doom asks why. Strange tells him the truth. He served Doom willingly when the alternative was non-existence, but he will not be party to the murder of heroes. And then he says the thing that kills him. He tells Doom that he is afraid of Reed Richards, afraid that Richards would have done better, afraid that the man he has always measured himself against will prove, once again, that Doom is second best. Doom kills Strange, snaps his neck. The sheriff of Battleworld dies because he told his god a truth that his god could not bear to hear. Think about that. Victor Von Doom is omnipotent. He created reality. He is worshipped by billions. And a single accusation of inadequacy, a single suggestion that Reed Richards would have been a better god, breaks him so completely that he murders the only friend he has left. That is not the behavior of a god. That is the behavior of a man who has always known, on some level he cannot access or accept, that he is not enough. All the power in the multiverse cannot fill the hole in Victor Von Doom. A quick reminder, subscribing genuinely helps us keep making these. We are grateful for every listener who sticks around. The middle issues of 2015's Secret Wars follow the scattered heroes as they navigate Battleworld's domains, discovering allies, gathering resources, and slowly assembling the means to challenge Doom. But the real story continues to be Doom himself. After Strange's death, a funeral is held in Doomstadt. Doom presides. The Molecule Man, from his chamber beneath the castle, warns Doom that killing Strange has started an unraveling, that the balance of Battleworld depended on Strange's presence, his willingness to legitimize Doom's rule through his service. Without that legitimacy, cracks will form. And cracks do form. The heroes, scattered across domains, begin to organize. They find allies among Battleworld's barons, people who sense that something is wrong with their reality, even if they cannot articulate what. They discover that Doom's power, while vast, has limits, that the structure of Battleworld maintained by Molecule Man's suffering is more fragile than it appears, that the god on the throne is less secure than his subjects believe. The build-up to the final confrontation is methodical. Black Panther acquires an infinity gauntlet from one of the domains. A zombie horde is directed toward Doom's stronghold. Ben Grimm, the Thing, transformed into the living wall of the shield itself in this reality, regains his memories and his autonomy. Galactus is deployed. An army of heroes assembles. The distractions are massive, cosmic, spectacular, but they are distractions. The real fight is smaller. The real fight is in a room, beneath a castle, between two men who have been fighting for over 50 years of published history. Reed Richards and Victor Von Doom, face to face, in the chamber where Molecule Man has been imprisoned for 8 years, keeping reality alive through his pain. And here is where Jonathan Hickman demonstrates why his version of Secret Wars endures as something more than a crossover event. The final confrontation is not a fight scene, it is a conversation. Reed does not attack Doom. Doom does not blast Reed. They talk. And what they talk about is the question that has defined their relationship since Fantastic Four #5 in 1962. Not who is more powerful, not who is more intelligent. The question is, who would do better? Given infinite power and absolute responsibility, who would create the better world? Molecule Man watches. He has been waiting for this moment. He has been suffering for 8 years, channeling power he never wanted, maintaining a reality he did not create, serving a man he does not believe in. And he asks Doom a question, a simple question, the simplest question. Could Reed Richards have done better? And Doom says yes. Let that sit for a second. Victor Von Doom, god of Battleworld, ruler of the last surviving reality, admits that Reed Richards would have been a better god, not in defeat, not under torture, not as a gambit or a lie. He admits it because, at the end of everything, at the bottom of all his ambition and all his rage and all his brilliance, Victor Von Doom knows who he is. He knows his limitations. He has always known them. And the rage, the villainy, the endless war against Reed Richards, all of it has been the outward expression of that knowledge. The refusal to accept what he has always known to be true. Molecule Man hears the admission, and he makes his choice. He strips Doom of the Beyonder's power. He gives it to Reed Richards, and Battleworld ends. The patchwork planet dissolves, the domains collapse. 8 years of enforced reality come apart like a dream upon waking. And Reed Richards, given the power of gods, does what Victor Von Doom could never do. He gives it away. He uses it to rebuild the multiverse, one universe at a time, working alongside his son Franklin, whose reality manipulation abilities allow the impossible work of recreating everything that was lost. The Richards family becomes cosmic architects, traveling the restored multiverse, creating worlds, mapping existence, doing what the Fantastic Four was always meant to do, explore the unknown and make it livable. But before the multiverse is restored, before everything returns to what it was, Molecule Man does one more thing. He remembers Miles Morales. During the chaos on Battleworld, Miles, Spider-Man from the Ultimate Universe, showed Molecule Man a simple kindness. He gave him a hamburger, that is all. A hungry man trapped in a chamber for 8 years, and a kid gave him food. And for that kindness, Molecule Man rewrites reality. He places Miles and his entire family into the restored Earth 616. He brings back Miles's mother, who had died years earlier in the Ultimate Universe. A hamburger, a small gesture of human decency, and it reshapes the universe. That is the ending of Secret Wars. Not a battle, not a victory. A confession, an act of kindness, and the willingness to rebuild rather than rule. 30 years of mythology condensed into a single truth. The difference between Dr. Doom and Reed Richards is not intelligence or power or ambition. The difference is that Reed Richards would rather fix things than own them, and Victor Von Doom, at the very end, after achieving godhood and holding it for 8 years, admits that fixing things is better than owning them. That is his tragedy. He knows the right answer. He has always known it. He simply cannot be the person who enacts it. The architecture of this story, spanning from 1984 to 2015, creates a thematic structure that no single event could achieve on its own. The Beyonder of 1984 was a being who could not understand desire. He watched humans fight and could not comprehend why they wanted things. The Beyonder of Secret Wars 2 was that same being attempting to experience desire firsthand and failing catastrophically. And the Beyonders of 2015 were a race that decided, if they could not understand finite existence, they would simply end it. Each iteration of the cosmic threat represents the same philosophical problem from a different angle. What do you do when omnipotence meets the incomprehensible fact of limitation? And each iteration of Dr. Doom provides the human answer to that cosmic question. In 1984, he steals godhood and immediately proves unable to sustain it. In 2015, he steals godhood and sustains it for 8 years, building a world, ruling it justly by his own standards, creating something real and functional from the ruins of everything. And still, it is not enough. Still the hole remains, still Reed Richards haunts him. Still the knowledge that he could have been better, that he chose not to be, that his own pride was always the obstacle, eats at him from inside. That is not a story about cosmic events. That is a story about the human condition. About the gap between who we are and who we know we should be. About the way ambition can become a cage. About the difference between wanting to be the best and wanting to do what is best. Dr. Doom wants to be the best. Reed Richards wants to do what is best. And the entire Secret Wars mythology exists to examine the chasm between those two desires. If you are finding value in this deep dive, subscribing is the single best way to support the channel. Every new subscriber helps us keep going. There is a specific craft to how Jonathan Hickman built the story leading into 2015's Secret Wars that deserves examination. Because the event did not simply appear. It was constructed, piece by piece, across 3 years of monthly comics, in a way that made the final destruction feel earned rather than arbitrary. Hickman began his Avengers run in December of 2012 with Avengers #1. Simultaneously, he launched New Avengers #1 in January of 2013. The two books ran in parallel, telling complementary stories that would eventually converge. Avengers was the public book, the one about the team expanding, about Captain America's grand vision of a larger, more powerful force for good. New Avengers was the secret book, the one about the Illuminati discovering the incursions and making impossible choices behind closed doors. The genius of this structure is that it created two reading experiences. Readers following only Avengers saw a superhero team growing stronger, facing cosmic threats, expanding their reach. Readers following both books saw the truth beneath the surface, that the Illuminati were committing atrocities in secret, that the expansion of the Avengers was partly a response to threats the public team did not know existed, that the entire Marvel universe was living on borrowed time. The incursions escalated slowly. Each one was worse than the last. Each one forced the Illuminati to confront a deeper moral compromise. They built weapons capable of destroying planets. They considered and rejected using them. Then they used them. Then they tried to stop and found they could not. Each universe they encountered during an incursion had its own heroes, its own versions of familiar faces, its own people who were just trying to survive. Killing them was not abstract. It was specific, personal, monstrous. The Time Runs Out storyline, which ran across both titles in late 2014 and early 2015, jumped 8 months forward in time, showing a Marvel universe where the consequences had fully arrived. Steve Rogers and Tony Stark were at war. The Illuminati were fugitives. S.H.I.E.L.D. was hunting them. Namor had betrayed the group and formed the Cabal with Thanos and other villains, taking over the task of destroying incursion Earths because the heroes could no longer stomach it. Everything was falling apart. The center could not hold. And then the final incursion, Earth 616 and Earth 1610, the Marvel Universe and the Ultimate Universe. The last two Earths in existence, hurtling toward each other. No weapon left to stop it. No moral compromise remaining to be made. Just the end of everything, witnessed by characters who have spent 3 years trying and failing to prevent it. That is storytelling on a scale that superhero comics rarely achieve. Not because of the cosmic scope, but because of the emotional specificity. Every character in that final issue carries the weight of specific choices, specific betrayals, specific failures. When the universes collide, it is not an abstraction. It is the culmination of hundreds of individual decisions, each one documented, each one given space to breathe, each one contributing to the inevitability of the end. The contrast with 1984 is instructive. The original Secret Wars transported heroes to Battleworld without build-up, without context, without emotional preparation. It was a spectacle first, a story second. The 2015 version made the spectacle the conclusion of a story that had been building for 3 years. The destruction of the multiverse felt like a tragedy, because the reader had lived through the slow, grinding process of its collapse. Nothing was sudden. Everything was earned. This is what separates great event comics from forgettable ones. Not the scale of the threat, not the number of characters involved, not the promise that nothing will ever be the same. What separates them is whether the event carries emotional weight, whether the reader arrives at the climactic moment already invested in what is being lost, whether the destruction means something beyond spectacle. The 2015 Secret Wars understood this. It made you live through the dying. It made you watch good people make terrible choices. It made you understand why the end was coming, not as a cosmic accident, but as the inevitable result of decisions made by characters you cared about. And when Battleworld emerged from the wreckage, when Doom's false paradise rose in the void, it meant something, because you knew what it had replaced. You knew what it cost. You knew who was buried underneath. There is a moment in Secret Wars issue 2 that crystallizes what Hickman was doing with the concept of Battleworld. The issue opens on this new reality, 8 years after the end of everything. We see Doom's world functioning. We see the Thor Corps dispensing justice. We see the domains, each one a pocket universe with its own rules. And we see Stephen Strange, Sheriff of Battleworld, presenting his daily report to God Emperor Doom. Strange is methodical. He lists minor infractions across the domains, border disputes, theological heresies, small violations of Doom's law, and Doom dismisses them all. He is not interested in the details of governance. He is interested in whether Strange senses what he senses, that something has changed, that the equilibrium is shifting, that something buried is about to surface. The scene is quiet. Two men in a room talking about the nature of the world they built from nothing. Doom is agitated in a way that omnipotence should not permit. Strange is cautious, measured, choosing his words with the care of someone who knows his God is unstable. And beneath them both, unspoken, is the knowledge that this world is a lie, that Battleworld is a prison disguised as a paradise, that every citizen living their lives in the domains is performing a role in a play they did not choose and do not remember auditioning for. The story does not frame Doom as a villain in this scene. It presents him as a ruler genuinely concerned about his creation, genuinely invested in its continuation, and that makes it worse, because the reader knows what Doom does not say, that this world exists because he could not save the real one, that every domain is a fragment of a dead universe, preserved like a butterfly pinned to a board, that the people living in those domains are not free, they are curated, they are managed, they are the possessions of a God who calls himself their protector. That is the Doom paradox. He saved what he could. That is genuinely heroic. He created stability from chaos. That is genuinely admirable. He maintained reality for 8 years through sheer force of will. That is genuinely impressive. And all of it is undermined by the fact that he did it for himself, not for the people of Battleworld, for himself, to prove that he could, to prove that he was worthy of godhood, to prove to an audience that no longer exists, that Victor Von Doom is the greatest being who ever lived. We have a lot more ground to cover, so if you are still with us, thank you. And if you have not yet subscribed, now is a wonderful time. The role of the Molecule Man in the 2015 Secret Wars requires its own extended consideration, because Owen Reese is the character through whom Hickman connects all 3 eras of the mythology into a single, coherent narrative. In 1984, Molecule Man was a villain, a powerful one, arguably the most powerful one on Battleworld, but a villain nonetheless. His story in the original Secret Wars was one of the series' most interesting subplots. A man of enormous power and minimal self-esteem, who falls in love with Volcana and begins to question whether villainy is his only option. He eventually helps the remaining villains escape Battleworld and return to Earth, an act of limited heroism that signals his gradual reformation. In Secret Wars 2, he is the one who kills the Beyonder. That is an extraordinary escalation. The most powerful entity in Marvel continuity, the being who created Battleworld and transported dozens of superhumans across the galaxy on a whim, is ultimately undone by Owen Reese, not by the combined might of the Avengers, not by cosmic entities, by a reformed villain with low self-confidence and the power to reshape all matter. And in 2015, Hickman reveals why. Molecule Man was always the key, not because of his personal qualities, but because of his origin. The Beyonders created him, every version of him, across every universe, simultaneously. They designed him to be a bomb, a living weapon of multiversal destruction, and the incursions, the slow collapse of everything, were the detonation sequence. This recontextualizes everything. Every appearance of Molecule Man across 30 years of comics becomes, retroactively, the story of a bomb trying to become a person. His low self-esteem, his villainy, his gradual reformation, his relationships, his choices, all of it takes on new meaning when you understand that he was never meant to have choices at all. He was meant to explode. The fact that he did not, the fact that he became someone capable of love and friendship and moral growth, is itself an act of defiance against the beings who created him. And Doom understood this. That is the key to the 2015 story. Doom discovered what Molecule Man was. He discovered what the Beyonders intended, and he made a choice. Not to destroy the bombs, not to defuse them, but to use them. Doom traveled through the multiverse, killing alternate versions of Molecule Man, each death weakening the Beyonders' plan, each death buying time. And when the final incursion came, when the Beyonders moved to complete their destruction, Doom and the Molecule Man of Earth 616 confronted them directly. They killed the Beyonders. Let that sink in. Victor Von Doom and Owen Reese, a megalomaniac in armor and a reformed villain who once could not muster the confidence to use his own powers, together killed the race of beings responsible for the death of the multiverse. They absorbed the Beyonders' power, and with that power, with the stolen might of the entities who had destroyed everything, Doom built Battleworld. He saved what he could. He made a world. But the cost was Owen Reese. For 8 years, Molecule Man was imprisoned beneath Doom's castle, channeling the Beyonders' power into reality, keeping Battleworld stable through his suffering. He was the foundation, the battery, the living engine that made Doom's godhood possible. Without him, Battleworld would collapse. Without his continuous agony, reality would end. Doom did not free him. Doom did not look for another way. Doom accepted Molecule Man's suffering as the price of his own godhood, and chose not to examine that acceptance too closely. This is, perhaps, the most damning thing about God Emperor Doom. Not that he is a tyrant, not that he rewrote people's memories, not that he killed Stephen Strange, but that he built his paradise on the torture of the one person who helped him achieve it. That he took Owen Reese's sacrifice and used it as a throne. When Reed Richards receives the Beyonders' power, the first thing he does is free Molecule Man. The first thing, before rebuilding the multiverse, before restoring the dead, before anything else, he releases Owen Reese from his prison and his pain, and then he gives Owen a choice. Not a command, not a demand, a choice. Help rebuild, if you want to, or rest. After 8 years of agony, rest. The contrast could not be clearer. Doom enslaved Molecule Man to maintain his own godhood. Richards freed Molecule Man and asked for his help as a partner, not a battery. That is the difference. That is always the difference. Not power, not intelligence, decency. The willingness to treat other people as people rather than resources. And Molecule Man chose to help. He chose to work alongside Reed and Franklin Richards, rebuilding universes, restoring the dead, remaking everything that was lost. Not because he was forced, because he was asked. Because for the first time in his existence, someone with absolute power treated him as a collaborator rather than a tool. That is what separates Reed Richards from Victor Von Doom. That is what separates a hero from a tyrant. Not the willingness to save the world, the willingness to let other people matter while you do it. The legacy of Secret Wars extends far beyond the events themselves. The 1984 version established the template for every crossover event that followed. It proved that readers would buy a dedicated series featuring their favorite characters in an impossible situation. It proved that significant changes to the status quo could drive sales exponentially. It proved that the promise of permanent consequences, even when those consequences were inevitably reversed, was commercially irresistible. But its creative legacy is equally significant. The symbiote, Venom, one of the most commercially successful characters in Marvel history, spawning multiple ongoing series, multiple films, a decades-long cultural presence, all originating from a scene where Spider-Man needed new clothes on an alien planet. The black costume saga that followed Secret Wars, Spider-Man's gradual realization that his suit was alive, his horror at its attempts to bond with him permanently, and ultimately the suit's rejection and rebirth as Venom through bonding with Eddie Brock, is one of the most iconic storylines in Spider-Man history. And it began with a toy tie-in. It began because Jim Shooter needed something to happen in issue 8 that would be visually striking enough to sell action figures. The Thing's decision to stay on Battleworld, exploring his ability to shift between forms, led to one of the longer-lasting status quo changes of the era. She-Hulk replaced him on the Fantastic Four for an extended period, proving popular enough in the role to validate years of subsequent stories. Colossus's affair with the alien healer Zaji permanently damaged his relationship with Kitty Pryde, a wound that X-Men writers would revisit for decades. And Doctor Doom's temporary apotheosis, his brief moment as the most powerful being in existence, established a pattern that would recur throughout his publication history. Doom reaching for ultimate power, Doom achieving it, Doom losing it because of his own psychological limitations. It happened in 1984, it happened in 2015, it happened in a dozen stories between. It is his cycle, his curse, his definition. If you are still listening, we truly appreciate it. Subscribing helps the channel more than you know, and it lets us keep going deeper into stories like this one. The 2015 Secret Wars also served a practical function for Marvel Comics as a publisher. It ended the Ultimate Universe. The Ultimate line, launched in 2000 with Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate X-Men, had created a separate continuity featuring modernized versions of Marvel's classic characters. For years, it was commercially successful and critically respected, but by 2015, the line had contracted to a handful of titles, the stories had grown increasingly dark and convoluted, and the readership had declined significantly. Secret Wars provided an elegant solution. Rather than simply canceling the Ultimate titles, Hickman folded Earth 1610 into the event. The Ultimate Universe was one of the two realities that collided in the final incursion. Its destruction was not arbitrary. It was narratively meaningful, part of the largest story Marvel was telling. And the characters worth preserving, primarily Miles Morales as Spider-Man, were transitioned into the main Marvel universe through the mechanism of the story itself. Miles did not simply appear in Earth 616, one day with no explanation. His presence was earned, justified, given emotional weight through Molecule Man's gratitude for a hamburger. That detail, the hamburger, is worth dwelling on. In the midst of a story about the death of the multiverse, about gods and tyrants and the end of everything, the mechanism that saves Miles Morales and brings him into the main Marvel universe is a sandwich. A kid giving food to a hungry man. The smallest possible act of human kindness, outweighing in narrative consequence every cosmic battle, every brilliant strategy, every display of power in the entire event. Hickman is telling you something there. He is telling you what actually matters. Not the battles, not the strategies, not the cosmic entities or the reality warping powers. What matters is how you treat people. What matters is whether you notice someone suffering and do something about it, even something small. Miles Morales earned his place in the main Marvel universe not by fighting Doom, not by displaying power, not by being clever or strategic. He earned it by being kind to someone who needed kindness. That is the moral center of the 2015 Secret Wars. Everything else, the cosmic scope, the epic battles, the philosophical conversations between gods, all of it is ornament around that simple truth. The publication of the 2015 Secret Wars was itself a story worth telling. The series was plagued by delays. Originally solicited as a 9-issue series running from May to December of 2015, the final issue did not ship until January of 2016. The delays were caused by the enormous detail of Esad Ribić's artwork, which required more time than the monthly schedule allowed. Marvel made the unusual decision to let the series slip rather than bringing in fill-in artists, a choice that preserved the visual consistency of the book but created months of frustration for readers following the story. During the delays, Marvel launched its post-Secret Wars titles. The all-new, all-different Marvel line debuted in October of 2015, set in the restored universe, while Secret Wars was still running. Readers knew the multiverse would be restored before the series actually showed it happening. This was not ideal from a narrative standpoint, but commercially, it allowed Marvel to maintain momentum rather than freezing their entire line while waiting for the event to conclude. Despite the delays, the critical reception of Secret Wars was overwhelmingly positive. Reviewers praised Hickman's ambition, the emotional depth of the Doom-Richards confrontation, the elegance of using Molecule Man as the narrative linchpin, and Ribić's stunning artwork. The series won multiple awards and is consistently cited as one of the finest crossover events in the history of superhero comics. Not because of its scope, which was admittedly enormous, but because of its focus. At its core, it was a story about two men and a question. Everything else was context. There is a reading of Secret Wars, across all its incarnations, that positions the entire mythology as a meditation on authorship. The Beyonder of 1984 is a creator who builds a world and populates it with characters, then commands them to fight for his entertainment. He is, in the most literal sense, a writer, a being who exists outside the narrative, who arranges characters according to his desires, who watches the results with fascination, but cannot truly participate. His incomprehension of desire mirrors the gap between author and character. He made them. He controls them. He cannot be them. Jim Shooter, writing that story, was the Beyonder, the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, arranging his company's characters on an alien planet, commanding them to fight, watching the results with commercial interest. The self-awareness of this is debatable, but the parallel is undeniable. Secret Wars was created because a toy company told a publisher to make characters fight. The Beyonder creates Battleworld because a cosmic curiosity told him to make characters fight. The structural echo is too precise to be entirely accidental. The Beyonder of Secret Wars 2 extends this reading, a creator who enters his own story, who attempts to live among his characters, who tries to understand them from the inside rather than observing from without, and who fails, because the conditions of creation and the conditions of existence are fundamentally incompatible. You cannot be both the author and the character. You cannot have both omnipotence and desire. The act of creating a world precludes the possibility of genuinely living in it. And the 2015 version completes the pattern. Doom, as the false author, the creator who builds a world but cannot make it real, whose creation is always, fundamentally, about himself, whose world reflects his needs rather than the needs of its inhabitants, and Reed Richards as the true author, the creator who builds not for himself but for others, who gives his creation autonomy, who lets the world be what it needs to be rather than what he wants it to be, who ultimately gives up authorship entirely, rebuilding the multiverse and then leaving it alone, trusting his creation to exist without his constant control. This is, at its most abstract, a story about the difference between good art and bad art. Bad art is about the creator. Good art is about the creation. Bad art controls. Good art liberates. Bad art says, look at what I can do. Good art says, look at what this can be. Victor Von Doom makes bad art. Reed Richards makes good art. And Secret Wars, across 3 decades, is the story of one replacing the other. That reading is perhaps too neat, too allegorical. Stories resist being reduced to single interpretations. But it lives within the text, available to those who find it useful, existing alongside the more straightforward readings of cosmic battles and superhero spectacle. Secret Wars is large enough to contain all of these interpretations simultaneously. That is what makes it endure. Let us return to specific moments. There are scenes across the Secret Wars mythology that deserve closer attention, scenes that crystallize the themes we have been discussing into single, vivid images. There is the moment in the 1984 series when Captain America's shield is destroyed. Issue 11, Doom, possessing the Beyonder's power, shatters the indestructible vibranium shield as a casual demonstration of his omnipotence. The shield that has survived everything, that is the symbol of everything Steve Rogers represents, breaks. And then, when Doom's power wavers, when the Beyonder reclaims his stolen energy, the shield reforms. It comes back together as though it was never broken, as though the damage was always temporary, as though the symbol was stronger than the force that tried to destroy it. That image, the broken shield reforming, is Secret Wars in miniature. The idea that whatever power Doom achieves, whatever damage his ambition causes, the things that actually matter will endure. Not because they are indestructible in a physical sense, but because they represent something that cannot be permanently broken by force. Principles, values, the stubborn belief that doing the right thing matters even when a god tells you it does not. There is the moment in 2015's Secret Wars when Cyclops, freshly emerged from the life raft, confronts Doom. Scott Summers, empowered by the Phoenix Force, the most powerful entity he has ever channeled, faces God Emperor Doom and demands answers. And Doom kills him. Immediately. Without effort. Without drama. Without a grand battle. Cyclops attacks. Doom gestures. Cyclops dies. The Phoenix Force itself, the cosmic entity of death and rebirth, is extinguished with a thought. The scene is shocking not because of the violence, but because of how little it means to Doom. He does not gloat, he does not speechify. He barely acknowledges what happened. A Phoenix-empowered mutant challenged his authority and was removed from existence the way a person swats a fly. The power differential is not dramatic. It is mundane. It is boring to Doom. And that boredom, that absolute lack of engagement with what should be one of the most significant confrontations in Marvel history, tells you everything about what godhood has done to him. Nothing challenges him, nothing surprises him, nothing matters. He has achieved everything and it has made everything meaningless. Contrast this with the final confrontation with Reed Richards. When Reed faces Doom in Molecule Man's chamber, Doom is engaged. Doom is present. Doom is emotional. Because Reed is the one person in existence who Doom cannot dismiss. Not because Reed is more powerful. He is not, at this point. But because Reed represents the question Doom cannot answer. The person he cannot best, in the only way that matters. And Doom's engagement with Reed, his willingness to actually fight, to actually argue, to actually feel something, is the clearest evidence that his godhood was always hollow. He can kill a phoenix without caring. He cannot face Reed Richards without trembling. There is also the moment when the thing becomes the wall. In the 2015 Battleworld, Ben Grimm has been transformed into part of the shield itself. His body, expanded to impossible size, forms a section of the barrier that keeps the zombie hordes and Ultron drones from overwhelming civilization. He is not a person anymore. He is infrastructure. A living wall, and he does not remember being anything else. That image is one of the most disturbing in the entire event. Not violent, not dramatic. Just the quiet horror of a person reduced to a function. Doom needed a wall. He had a person with an indestructible body, so he made the person into the wall. No consent, no memory, no identity, just service. And when the thing regains his memories, when he remembers who he was and what was done to him, the rage is cosmic. He tears himself free from the shield. He becomes the thing again. He joins the assault on Doom. And the fact that this was done to him, that Doom would do this to a person who was once his rival's best friend, tells you everything about what Doom's godhood actually is. The willingness to use people as materials. There is a pattern here. Doom uses people. Molecule Man as a battery. The Thing as a wall. Strange as a sheriff. The citizens of Battleworld as subjects. Everyone in Doom's world exists to serve a function in Doom's narrative. They are not people to him. They are components, resources, tools. And this is why his godhood fails. Not because he lacks power, not because he lacks intelligence, but because a world built from people treated as tools is not a world that can sustain itself. It is a machine, and machines break. Reed Richards, by contrast, works with people. He asks. He collaborates. He treats his allies as equals whose agency matters. When he rebuilds the multiverse, he does it alongside Franklin and Molecule Man, not through them. When he creates new worlds, he lets them be what they are, not what he wants them to be. The difference is not cosmic, it is ethical. It is the difference between building with people and building from people. This distinction, this fundamental ethical framework underlying the cosmic spectacle, is what gives Secret Wars its lasting power. Stripped of the superhero trappings, stripped of the omnipotent beings and the patchwork planets, and the reality-warping confrontations, the story is about leadership, about what it means to have power over others, about whether you use that power to serve yourself or to serve the people you have power over. about whether the people in your world are citizens or subjects, participants or materials. And the answer the story provides, across 3 decades and 3 separate events, is unambiguous. Power used for self-aggrandizement fails. Always. Even when it succeeds by every external measure. Even when the world you build is functional and stable and beautiful. If it exists to serve your ego rather than the people within it, it will collapse. Because people are not tools. Because using them as tools creates a fragility that no amount of power can compensate for. Because somewhere, eventually, someone will look at your perfect world and say, "You could have done better," and you will know they are right. Take a moment to subscribe if you have not already. It is a small thing that makes a real difference for us. The visual language of Secret Wars deserves attention as well. Mike Zeck's artwork in the 1984 series established a visual vocabulary that would persist through every subsequent iteration. His Battleworld was a landscape of contrasts. Alien technology alongside suburban houses transported from Denver, cosmic vistas alongside intimate character moments, the enormous scale of the conflict rendered in a way that never lost sight of the individual humans within it. Zeck's most iconic contribution is the design of Spider-Man's black costume, the sleek, mirror-finished black suit with the white spider emblem and the expressive white eye patches. It is one of the most recognizable costume designs in superhero history, and it originated in the pages of Secret Wars number 8. The design was based on a concept submitted by a fan, Randy Schuler, who had sent Marvel a letter suggesting a black stealth costume for Spider-Man. Marvel purchased the idea for $220. Zeck refined it into the iconic version that appeared in the series. And from that combination of fan suggestion, artist interpretation, and narrative need, one of the most enduring visual icons in comics was born. Esad Ribić's artwork in the 2015 series operates in a completely different register. Where Zeck was dynamic and kinetic, Ribić is monumental and operatic. His Battleworld feels ancient. His Doom feels like a Renaissance painting come to life. His characters occupy space with a weight and gravity that makes every panel feel like a historical illustration rather than a monthly comic. The final confrontation between Reed and Doom, rendered in Ribić's style, feels like a biblical scene. 2 figures in a dark room, the fate of everything hanging on their conversation. The restraint of the imagery matches the restraint of the writing. No explosions, no energy blasts. Just 2 men, finally honest with each other, after decades of lies. The coloring in both series contributes enormously to their respective moods. The 1984 series uses the bold, flat colors of its era, giving Battleworld a bright, almost toy-like quality that matches its origins as a commercial property. The 2015 series uses muted, textured coloring by Yves Sforcina that gives Battleworld a weathered quality, a sense of age and wear that supports the revelation that this world has existed for 8 years. The colors tell you, before a single word is read, that these are different stories asking different questions. The design of God Emperor Doom in the 2015 series is worth examining in isolation. His armor is white and gold, a deliberate inversion of his traditional green and silver. He wears a robe over the armor, giving him the appearance of a religious figure rather than a warrior. His face is exposed, healed of the scars that have defined his visual identity for decades, because when you are God, you can make yourself perfect, and yet the choice to show his face, to reveal the unblemished features beneath the mask, makes him look more vulnerable rather than less. The mask was always his protection. Without it, you can see what he is feeling, and what he is feeling, across 9 issues, is doubt. The storytelling in Secret Wars 2015 also makes sophisticated use of silence. There are pages with no dialogue, pages where the art carries the entire narrative weight. The moment when Doom kills Strange is rendered in a sequence of panels that moves from medium shot to close-up to a single image of Strange's body falling, with no sound effects, no speech bubbles, no narration. The silence is the point. This is a god killing his only friend, and there is nothing to say about it. No justification that would be adequate, no dialogue that would make it meaningful, just the act and the silence that follows. There is a counterpoint moment later, when Black Panther confronts Doom wearing the Infinity Gauntlet. This scene is loud, explosive, full of cosmic energy and dramatic declarations, and it means less. It means less because it is a distraction. It is spectacle deployed to draw Doom's attention, while the real confrontation, the quiet one, the one between Reed and Doom and Molecule Man in a dark room beneath the castle, takes place off stage. The loud battle is irrelevant. The quiet conversation is everything. And the visual contrast between those two scenes, the bombastic distraction and the intimate truth, is deliberate. It tells you where to look. It tells you what matters. The question of what Marvel will do with Secret Wars next is, as of this recording, very much alive. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has been building toward its own version of Avengers. Secret Wars, announced as the capstone of the Multiverse saga. How much of the comic book mythology will survive translation to film remains to be seen. The concepts of incursions and the multiverse have already been introduced in films like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The existence of variant characters and alternate realities has been established across multiple Disney Plus series and feature films. The foundation exists. But the soul of Secret Wars, the thing that makes it more than a crossover event, is the Doom-Richards relationship. It is the confession. It is the question of what you would do with absolute power and whether you would use it for yourself or for others. That is not a question that can be answered with a fight scene. It requires emotional specificity. It requires that the audience understand both characters deeply enough to feel the weight of Doom's admission. It requires that the final moment be quiet rather than loud, intimate rather than spectacular. Whether the MCU can achieve that remains an open question. But the source material has given them everything they need. The blueprint is there. The emotional architecture is complete. Secret Wars is not, at its core, a story about battles. It is a story about a man admitting he is not good enough. And that admission, if rendered with the same honesty and precision that Hickman achieved on the page, could be one of the most powerful moments in the history of superhero cinema. But that is the future. What we have now, what exists in the published record, is a mythology that spans 3 decades and contains one of the most profound character studies in superhero comics. The story of Victor Von Doom, who wanted to be God and achieved it, and discovered that godhood without goodness is just tyranny with better branding. The story of Reed Richards, who never wanted power and received it and used it to free rather than rule. The story of Owen Reese, who was built to be a weapon and chose to be a person. The story of the Beyonder, who had everything and could understand nothing. And the story of a hamburger that saved a universe. Thank you for staying with us this far. Subscribing really does help, and we notice every one of you who does. There is one more thread to follow, the thematic thread that connects the Beyonder of 1984, the Beyonders of 2015, and the question that drives both iterations of Secret Wars. What is the relationship between power and understanding? The original Beyonder cannot understand desire because he is omnipotent. When you can have anything, wanting becomes meaningless. This is not a metaphor, it is a literal description of his problem. Desire requires limitation. You can only want what you do not have. You can only strive toward what you have not achieved. Remove those limits, and desire itself becomes impossible. The Beyonder creates his experiment on Battleworld because he is trying to observe desire in action, to study it from the outside, hoping that observation will substitute for experience. It cannot. And Secret Wars 2 demonstrates why. When the Beyonder takes human form and attempts to experience desire firsthand, he discovers that the experience is inaccessible to him because he can always satisfy any want immediately. He wants food. He has food. He wants companionship. He can compel companionship. He wants love. He can create the appearance of love. Nothing resists him. Nothing challenges him. Nothing forces him to grow or change or earn. And without those forces, the human experiences he craves remain forever out of reach. The Beyonders of 2015 take this to its logical conclusion. If omnipotent beings cannot understand finite existence, and if finite existence is therefore permanently alien and incomprehensible to them, then the rational response from their perspective is elimination. They cannot understand the multiverse, so they destroy it, not out of malice, out of the same frustrated incomprehension that drove the original Beyonder to create Battleworld. The difference is scale. The 1984 Beyonder tried to observe. The 1985 Beyonder tried to participate. The 2015 Beyonders decided to erase what they could not comprehend. And Dr. Doom, in every version, provides the human mirror to this cosmic problem. He achieves godhood. In 1984, briefly. In 2015, for 8 years. And in both cases, he discovers the same thing the Beyonder discovered. Power without understanding is empty. You can have everything and comprehend nothing. You can rule a world and not know why your subjects suffer. You can be omnipotent and still feel inadequate. Power and understanding are not the same thing, and no amount of the former can produce the latter. Reed Richards, by contrast, is defined by understanding, not by power. His stretching ability is arguably the least impressive power among Marvel's major heroes. What makes him extraordinary is his mind, his capacity for comprehension, his ability to see patterns, to understand systems, to grasp how things work and why they fail. And when he receives the Beyonder's power at the end of Secret Wars 2015, he does something that neither Doom nor the Beyonder could do. He uses power in service of understanding, rather than using understanding in service of power. That inversion is everything. Doom understands things in order to acquire power over them. Richards acquires power in order to understand things better. Doom uses knowledge as a weapon. Richards uses knowledge as a bridge. Doom learns about the universe to control it. Richards learns about the universe because learning is its own reward. And when both men achieve omnipotence, this fundamental difference in orientation determines everything that follows. Doom builds a world that reflects his ego. Richards builds a multiverse that reflects reality's own complexity. Doom creates order. Richards creates possibility. This is not a simple morality tale. Hickman is careful to acknowledge what Doom achieved. He saved something. When everything died, when the multiverse collapsed and the Beyonders won, Victor Von Doom was the one who stopped them, not Reed Richards, not the Avengers, not any combination of heroes. Doom, alone, with Molecule Man's help, Doom killed gods and built a world from their corpses. That matters. That is not nothing. The other heroes, for all their principles, failed. They could not stop the incursions. They could not prevent the end. They could not do what needed to be done. Doom could, and did. And the fact that his solution was imperfect, that his world was built on suffering and lies, that his godhood was hollow at its center, does not erase the fact that he acted when no one else could. He saved something when everything else was lost. That is the tragedy. Not that Doom is wrong, but that he is partially right, partially heroic, partially admirable, and that the gap between partial and complete, between almost good enough and actually good enough, is where all the pain lives. Reed Richards would have done better. Doom admits this. The story confirms it. But Reed Richards did not do it. Reed Richards was in a life raft, unconscious, floating through the void where reality used to be, while Doom killed the Beyonders and built Battleworld. The man who would have done better was not there when it mattered, and the man who was there, the man who actually saved what could be saved, will never be able to escape the knowledge that his saving was imperfect. That is not a simple story about good and evil. That is a story about the human condition, about doing your best and knowing your best is not good enough, about the distance between who you are and who you wish you were, about the impossibility of accepting your own limitations when you can see, clearly, someone who does not share them. Victor Von Doom is not a monster. He is a man who cannot accept being second best in a universe where someone better exists. And Secret Wars, across all its incarnations, is the story of what that refusal costs him. The final image of the 2015 Secret Wars is Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Franklin, and Valeria traveling the renewed multiverse together, not ruling it, not controlling it, exploring it, discovering it, letting it be what it is. The Fantastic Four return to their original purpose, exploration, not as conquerors or gods or saviors, as travelers, as students, as a family who finds joy in understanding rather than ownership. And somewhere, in the restored Earth 616, Victor Von Doom wakes up, his face healed, the scars gone, a gift from the Richards family as they departed. Doom, who defined himself by his disfigurement, by his rage at the imperfection Reed Richards caused, finds himself whole, unmarked, beautiful, the grudge he has carried for decades, literally erased from his face. It is an act of forgiveness so generous it borders on cruelty. Because now Doom has to decide who he is without the wound, without the excuse, without the justification for everything he has done. That is where Secret Wars leaves him. Not defeated, not imprisoned, not punished, forgiven, and forgiveness, for Victor Von Doom, might be the cruelest thing Reed Richards has ever done to him. Because defeat he could survive, punishment he could endure. But forgiveness requires that he change. Forgiveness says, you do not have to be this anymore. And the question of whether Victor Von Doom can accept that, whether he can become someone other than the man who was always second best, is the question that every subsequent Doom story must answer. Secret Wars is not one story. It is 3 stories told across 30 years, each one building on the last, each one deepening the questions the previous one raised. It begins as a toy commercial and ends as a meditation on power, desire, creation, and the impossibility of perfection. It begins with a cosmic being who cannot understand want, and ends with a mortal man who cannot stop wanting. It begins with a battle and ends with a confession, and at its center, always, is the same truth, the same quiet, devastating truth that Molecule Man's chamber holds. The truth that Dr. Doom speaks when he has nothing left to lose. The truth that Reed Richards embodies without ever needing to articulate it. You cannot build a world worth living in if you are building it for yourself. You cannot be God if being God is about you. The universe does not exist to reflect your greatness. It exists to be lived in, and the measure of what you build is not how powerful it makes you, but how free it makes the people within it. That is the thematic architecture. But to truly understand Secret Wars, we need to go deeper into the specific moments, the specific issues, the specific choices that make this mythology breathe. Let us slow down. Let us return to Battleworld, both versions of it, and examine what happens when you look closely at the details. There is a moment in Secret Wars Issue 3, from September of 1984, titled Tempest Without, Crisis Within, that establishes one of the most important dynamics of the entire series. The X-Men, having watched the Avengers reject Magneto with hostility and suspicion, decide to leave the hero coalition. They choose to join Magneto, to side with the man the Beyonder placed among the heroes but whom the heroes refuse to accept. Spider-Man discovers this plan. He overhears the X-Men discussing their departure and he confronts them alone. This is 1984 Spider-Man, not yet burdened with decades of additional mythology, and he fights the entire X-Men team by himself. Wolverine, Colossus, Storm, Nightcrawler, Rogue. He takes them all on because he believes in the principle of unity against a common threat, and he cannot understand why anyone would abandon that principle. And then Professor Xavier erases his memory, wipes the entire confrontation from Spider-Man's mind, removes the knowledge so that Spider-Man cannot report the X-Men's defection to Captain America. It is a violation. A psychic violation committed by one of the supposed good guys against another supposed good guy because the political situation is too complicated for simple heroics to resolve. The story does not frame this as a villainous act. It does not present Xavier as a monster. It presents the moment as the natural, perhaps inevitable consequence of placing these characters in a situation where their fundamental disagreements cannot be papered over. The X-Men exist in a world that hates and fears them. The Avengers, however well-meaning, represent the establishment that has historically oppressed mutants. Magneto, whatever his methods, understands mutant suffering in a way that Captain America never can. When forced to choose, the X-Men choose their own. That fracture, heroes divided along ideological lines, heroes unable to maintain unity even in the face of cosmic threat, is a preview of everything Marvel will explore for the next 40 years. Civil War, Avengers vs. X-Men, the Illuminati's fracturing in Hickman's New Avengers. The idea that good people can disagree so fundamentally about how to respond to threats that their disagreement becomes a greater danger than the threats themselves. Secret Wars 1984 plants that seed in issue 3, and the Marvel Universe has been harvesting it ever since. The same issue introduces Titania and Volcana, two women empowered by Dr. Doom using alien technology from Battleworld. Their creation is, in production terms, entirely commercial. Mattel needed female action figures. Jim Shooter needed female characters to make into action figures. So he wrote Doom, creating them from ordinary women transported to Battleworld with the Denver suburb. The origin is cynical, the result is not. Titania, in particular, becomes one of Marvel's most enduring characters, She-Hulk's primary antagonist. A woman defined by her love of physical power, by her transformation from someone powerless and bullied into someone who can fight the strongest beings in existence. Her arc across subsequent decades, her relationship with the absorbing man, her rivalries and alliances, and gradual deepening as a character, all begins here, in a toy commercial, in a moment of commercial necessity that produced something genuine. Volcana's story is smaller but equally interesting. She falls in love with the Molecule Man on Battleworld, two minor characters finding comfort in each other amid cosmic chaos. Their relationship becomes one of the most grounded elements of the entire series. Two people who did not ask to be here, who did not ask for these powers, who just want to be left alone together. In a story about gods and cosmic battles, their simple desire for normalcy is the most human thing on Battleworld. Issue 5, The Battle of Four Armies, complicates the conflict further. The X-Men have sided with Magneto. Galactus looms on a nearby mountain, doing nothing, waiting, making everyone nervous simply by existing. The villains attack the heroes' base, and the heroes must fight on multiple fronts simultaneously, against enemies they are supposed to be defeating and alongside allies they no longer trust. The clean binary the Beyonder established, heroes versus villains, winner takes all, has already collapsed into something messier, more realistic, more genuinely dramatic. Galactus does not act until issue 9. He has been a presence throughout, enormous and patient, and his patience is the most terrifying thing about him. When he finally begins to consume Battleworld, it is not an attack. It is not a declaration of war. It is simply hunger. Galactus eats planets because Galactus is hungry. The moral dimension that everyone else on Battleworld operates within, good and evil, heroism and villainy, does not apply to him. He is beyond those categories. He is an elemental force. And when he begins to feed, everyone else becomes irrelevant. The heroes stop him, barely. But the attempt costs them resources they cannot afford to lose, and it distracts them from Doom's machinations. Which is, of course, exactly what Doom counted on. Every crisis, every battle, every escalation throughout the 12 issues serves Doom's agenda, whether he directly caused it or not. He is the one character who never loses sight of his actual goal. Everyone else reacts, Doom acts. Everyone else fights the war the Beyonder designed. Doom fights a war no one else knows is happening. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being the smartest person in the room. It is the loneliness of seeing a game that no one else can see, of playing toward a goal that no one else can imagine, of succeeding at something that no one else will ever acknowledge because they never understood it was being attempted. That is Doom's experience on Battleworld. He is surrounded by brilliant people. Reed Richards, Professor Xavier, Tony Stark in spirit, Jim Rhodes in fact. And none of them see what he sees. None of them recognize that the real game is not heroes versus villains. The real game is mortal versus God. Doom does not share his plan because sharing would require admitting that he needs help. And Victor Von Doom will die before admitting that. He does not recruit allies because allies would need to understand, and understanding his plan would mean understanding his vulnerability, his awareness that the Beyonder is above him, his inability to accept that there exists a being more powerful than himself. These are not tactical secrets. They are psychological ones. The plan to steal the Beyonder's power is inseparable from the pathology that demands it. This is why Doom fails in 1984 and succeeds in 2015. In 1984, he is alone. He steals omnipotence through genius and willpower and immediately discovers that omnipotence wielded alone is unsustainable. The power overwhelms his psychology because there is no one to share the burden, no one to provide perspective, no one to reflect anything back at him other than his own doubts. In 2015, he has Molecule Man, not as a partner in the collaborative sense, but as a foundation, someone else carrying part of the weight, someone else whose existence makes the whole structure possible. And he has Strange, at least for a while, a sheriff who provides the appearance of legitimacy. The success of 2015's Doom is not that he became more psychologically whole, it is that he found people to use as structural supports for his own incompleteness. The tragedy is that using people as supports is not the same as growing beyond the need for them. Colossus and Zaji. This is a subplot that the 1984 series handles with surprising delicacy, given the commercial pressures driving the overall narrative. Colossus, Pyotr Rasputin, arrives on Battleworld in a relationship with Kitty Pryde. He is devoted to her. He has been devoted to her through years of published comics. And then he meets Zizaji, an alien healer in a village on Battleworld, and he falls in love with someone else. The series does not frame this as simple infidelity. It does not portray Colossus as weak or unfaithful. It portrays him as genuinely confused by the intensity of his feelings, genuinely anguished by the contradiction between his commitment to Kitty and his attraction to Zizaji. Zizaji heals the wounded heroes after every battle. She literally puts them back together. There is something both maternal and romantic in her care, something that a young Russian mutant far from home, fighting a war he did not choose, on a planet he does not understand, would find irresistible. When the heroes return to Earth at the end of the series, Colossus breaks up with Kitty Pryde. He tells her the truth, and the X-Men books treat this as a genuine emotional wound, not resolved for years, not easily healed, not forgotten. A subplot born from a toy tie-in crossover produced one of the most emotionally resonant relationship conflicts in X-Men history. Kitty's pain at the betrayal, Colossus's guilt at his own feelings, the impossibility of explaining that a cosmic war made you fall in love with an alien. These became story engines that powered years of subsequent comics. That is the paradox of Secret Wars, 1984. It was created for the most cynical commercial reasons imaginable. A toy company's focus group data determined its title. A toy company's product needs determined its character roster. A toy company's timeline determined its publishing schedule. And within those constraints, within that corporate framework, genuine stories happened. Genuine emotions were explored. Genuine characters were created. The commercial imperatives did not prevent art. They accidentally enabled it. There is a lesson there about creativity under constraint, about how limitations can force innovations that freedom never would, about how the pressure to include certain characters, to create certain visual moments, to serve certain commercial needs, can sometimes push a story into territory it would never have explored on its own. Jim Shooter did not choose to write a toy commercial, but having been forced to write one, he wrote one that contained real human drama alongside its cosmic spectacle. And the human drama is what people remember, over 40 years later, when the toys themselves are long out of production. The Hickman build-up to 2015's Secret Wars deserves a more granular examination, because the specific way he structured his Avengers and New Avengers runs created a reading experience unlike anything superhero comics had previously achieved. New Avengers #1, published in January of 2013, opens with Black Panther witnessing an incursion for the first time. He sees another Earth hanging in the sky above Wakanda. He sees it growing closer. He understands, with the clarity of a genius and a king, that this cannot be natural, that something is terribly wrong with reality itself. And he does the only thing he can think of. He summons the Illuminati. The Illuminati had previously been a controversial concept in Marvel Comics, a secret council of the most powerful minds on Earth, meeting without the knowledge or consent of the broader hero community, making decisions that affect everyone. The group had been introduced by Brian Michael Bendis and had been the subject of significant fan debate. Was this responsible leadership or unaccountable elitism? Were these men protecting the world or controlling it? Hickman takes that debate and makes it the entire premise of his run. The Illuminati must deal with the incursions. They must make choices that no democratic process would sanction. They must decide, in secret, whether to destroy entire worlds to save their own. And the weight of those choices, the moral degradation they cause, the way they corrode the souls of fundamentally good men, is the story. Tony Stark builds planet-destroying weapons and hates himself for it. Stephen Strange makes bargains with dark powers to gain the strength needed for the impossible task. Namor embraces the necessary violence with a terrifying ease that disturbs even his allies. Black Bolt maintains his silence, but his presence grows heavier, more ominous, more burdened. And Black Panther and Reed Richards, the two men who understand most clearly what they are doing and what it means, fracture under the weight of their own complicity. The key moment comes in a crucial issue of New Avengers, published in the summer of 2014. An incursion is happening. Another Earth is approaching. The Illuminati have built their weapons but cannot bring themselves to use them. They choose to let their own universe die rather than murder another world's population. They choose morality over survival. And Namor says, no. He takes the weapon. He activates it. He destroys the other Earth. Billions of people die. And the Marvel Universe survives, for now, because one man was willing to do what the others could not. The aftermath tears everything apart. Black Panther cannot forgive Namor. Their conflict, already deep due to the destruction Namor brought to Wakanda during Avengers vs. X-Men, becomes absolute. The Illuminati expels Namor. He forms the Cabal with Thanos, Proxima Midnight, Corvus Glaive, Terrax, and the Black Swan. The villains take over the task of destroying incursion Earths because the heroes abdicated it, and the heroes must live with the knowledge that their moral purity was purchased at the cost of enabling something worse. Steve Rogers, meanwhile, discovers what the Illuminati have been doing. Tony Stark had wiped his memory of the initial meeting, erasing Steve's knowledge of the group and the incursions. When the truth emerges, Steve declares war on Tony. Not metaphorical war, actual conflict. The Avengers split. The world's heroes fight each other while the multiverse collapses around them. This is the state of the Marvel Universe when the final incursion arrives. Not unified, not heroic, not ready. Broken, exhausted, compromised. Every relationship damaged, every principle violated, every hope for a clean solution long since abandoned. The heroes do not face the end of everything as a team. They face it as fragments, as survivors of their own moral collapse, as people who know they failed long before the multiverse did. And that failure is what makes Doom's success so painful. Because Doom did what the heroes could not because he was stronger, not because he was smarter, because he was willing to do things they would not do, because his lack of moral constraint, his willingness to enslave Molecule Man, his willingness to kill the Beyonders through any means necessary, his willingness to build a world on lies and suffering, these are exactly the qualities the heroes refused to develop. And by refusing, they left the door open for him. The heroes chose their principles over survival. Doom chose survival over everything. And the result was Battleworld, a world saved by a man without principles. The question Secret Wars asks is not who is right. The question is whether a world saved by villainy can ever become something worth saving, whether Doom's creation, born from ruthlessness and maintained through tyranny, contains the possibility of becoming something better than its origin, and the answer, provided by the ending, is only if someone else rebuilds it, only if the man who saved it is willing to step aside for the man who can redeem it. The domains of Battleworld in the 2015 Secret Wars deserve their own consideration, because the structure Hickman created was not merely a plot device, it was a meditation on the entire history of Marvel Comics. Each domain of Battleworld represented a different era, a different storyline, a different version of the Marvel Universe preserved like a specimen in amber. There was the domain of the Marvel Zombies, where the undead heroes from the popular 2005 miniseries continued their horrific existence. There was the domain of the Age of Apocalypse, where the classic 1995 X-Men alternate timeline lived on. There was Technopolis, a domain based on the Armor Wars storyline. There was the Regency, where Spider-Man's Renew Your Vows scenario played out, a version of Peter Parker who was still married to Mary Jane and had a daughter. Each domain had a baron. Each domain had its own rules. Citizens could not travel between domains without Doom's permission. The boundaries were enforced by the Thor Corps, an army of variant Thors drawn from every domain, each one wielding a hammer, each one serving as both police and religious authority. The Thors worshipped Doom as God. Their hammers were his gift. Their authority was his extension. The 50-plus tie-in series that accompanied the main Secret Wars book explored these domains in detail. Last Days titles showed the final moments of the main Marvel universe before its destruction. Battleworld titles explored the Patchwork planet during Doom's reign. Warzone's titles told stories within specific domains, giving each preserved reality its own narrative space. This structure allowed Marvel to do something unprecedented: tell stories simultaneously in every version of their universe that had ever existed. Want more Age of Apocalypse? It is a domain. Want more 1602? It is a domain. Want more House of M? It is a domain. Every beloved alternate timeline, every fan-favorite storyline, every what-if scenario that readers had wished could continue was given space on Battleworld. And that is the metatextual layer of Doom's godhood. He is not just a character within the story. He is, metaphorically, the editorial authority of Marvel Comics itself. The entity that decides which stories continue, which characters get space, which timelines are permitted to exist. His control over Battleworld mirrors an editor-in-chief's control over a publishing line, and the citizens' enforced amnesia, their inability to remember that other realities existed, mirrors the way continuity reboots erase reader attachment to previous versions of characters. When Doom falls and Reed rebuilds the multiverse, he restores independence to every reality. He gives each universe its own existence, free from Doom's control, free from the constraints of a single governing authority. That is not just a cosmic act. It is a statement about storytelling, about the value of letting stories exist on their own terms rather than subordinating them to a single editorial vision, about the difference between curating stories and controlling them. The Thor Corps is one of the most fascinating inventions of the 2015 event. An army of Thors, each one from a different reality, each one wielding a variant of Mjolnir, each one serving as both law enforcement and religious order. They patrol the borders between domains. They investigate crimes against Doom's law. They answer to a hierarchy with Ultimate Thor at its peak, and dozens of variant Thors beneath him. There is something deeply unsettling about the Thor Corps. These are heroes. In their original realities, they were champions of justice, defenders of the innocent, wielders of a hammer that can only be lifted by the worthy. And here, on Battleworld, they serve a tyrant. They enforce unjust laws. They prevent freedom of movement. They maintain a system built on lies. And they do it willingly, because their memories have been rewritten, because they genuinely believe Doom is God, because their worthiness has been redefined to mean loyalty rather than justice. That corruption of worthiness is one of the most disturbing elements of Doom's Battleworld. Mjolnir's enchantment has always been clear. Whosoever holds this hammer, if they be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. Worthiness is moral. It is about character, about righteousness, about the willingness to sacrifice for others. On Battleworld, worthiness means obedience to Doom. The most fundamental moral metric in the Marvel Universe has been perverted to serve a tyrant's agenda, and the Thors do not even know it. They believe they are worthy. They believe they serve justice. They believe Doom is righteous. The lie is so complete that it corrupts even the mechanisms designed to detect corruption. When the truth about Battleworld begins to emerge, some Thors rebel. They investigate the life raft. They discover that their reality is not what they believed, and their rebellion, their choice to seek truth over comfortable ignorance, is one of the most heroic acts in the entire event. Not because it requires physical courage, though it does, but because it requires the willingness to destroy your own worldview, to accept that everything you believed was a lie, to choose uncomfortable truth over comfortable fiction. That choice, truth over comfort, is the choice the entire event is about. Every character in Secret Wars 2015 eventually faces that decision. Doom has chosen comfort. He built a world where he is God and enforced it through amnesia and violence. The heroes choose truth. They choose to remember. They choose to fight for reality over fabrication. And the conflict between those two choices, between the comfort of a beautiful lie and the pain of an ugly truth, is the moral center of the story. There is something worth noting about the way time functions in Secret Wars 2015. The 8-year gap between the destruction of the multiverse and the opening of the life rafts is not merely a plot device. It establishes that Doom's Battleworld is not a temporary arrangement. It is not a crisis to be resolved. It is a civilization. It has history. It has culture. It has generations of people who have lived and died knowing nothing other than Doom's world. When the heroes emerge from the life rafts and begin working to overthrow Doom, they are not simply restoring the status quo. They are destroying a world. Battleworld, for all its lies and tyranny, is real to the people living in it. They have families, jobs, relationships, histories, memories, however fabricated. When Battleworld falls, when the domains collapse, when reality is rebuilt in its proper form, those people cease to exist. Or rather, they are subsumed back into the universes they originally came from, their Battleworld identities erased, their Battleworld relationships dissolved. The story does not dwell on this. It treats the restoration of the multiverse as unambiguously good, which from a cosmic perspective it is. But there is a quiet horror in it that Hickman does not entirely suppress. A civilization destroyed, billions of lives, however artificial their memories, ended or transformed without consent. The heroes win, the multiverse is restored, but the cost, counted in fictional lives that mattered to other fictional lives, is enormous. This is the paradox of every reality is wrong and must be fixed story in superhero comics. House of M had the same problem. The Age of Apocalypse had the same problem. Every time a hero resets reality to its proper state, they are committing an act of cosmic violence against the people who existed in the wrong version. Secret Wars 2015 does not resolve this paradox, but it acknowledges it. It lets the weight of it exist in the background, even as the foreground celebrates the restoration of everything that was lost. The relationship between the original Beyonder and the reconceptualized Beyonders of 2015 requires careful examination because Hickman's revision is one of the most elegant pieces of retroactive continuity in Marvel history. The Beyonder of 1984 and 1985 was a single entity, the totality of his own dimension, a being so vast that our entire multiverse was, to him, nothing more than an interesting particle floating in his infinite substance. He was omnipotent, omniscient, and utterly incomprehensible to mortal minds. His motivations were philosophical. Understand desire, understand existence, understand what it means to be a separate being in a universe of other separate beings. The Beyonders of 2015 are a race, multiple entities, each one vastly powerful but not individually omnipotent. They exist beyond the multiverse, outside it, observing it from a position of cosmic remove. And their project is not understanding, it is destruction. They created the Molecule Men as bombs. They engineered the Incursions as a countdown. They designed the death of everything, not because they hated it or feared it, but because they were done with it, like scientists ending an experiment, like children breaking a toy they have grown bored with. Hickman never explicitly states that his Beyonders are the same entity as the 1984 Beyonder. He does not need to. The implication is sufficient. The Beyonder who created the original Battleworld, who could not understand desire, who ultimately attempted to destroy the multiverse in Secret Wars 2, is revealed, 3 decades later, to have been part of a larger pattern. His experiment on Battleworld was research. His attempt at human experience was research. His final destructive tantrum was a prototype for the Beyonders' larger plan. Everything fits. Everything connects. The 30-year gap between stories becomes not a discontinuity, but a slow revelation. And the Molecule Man connects them directly. He killed the Beyonder in 1985. He was created by the Beyonders as revealed in 2015. He is the link between eras, the character who was present at both the killing of the original cosmic entity and the killing of the cosmic race that created him. His journey from minor villain to cosmic linchpin is the hidden backbone of the entire Secret Wars mythology. There is a beautiful structural symmetry here. In 1984, the Beyonder created Battleworld and placed Molecule Man on it as a participant in his experiment. In 2015, Molecule Man is the foundation of Battleworld itself, the power source that makes Doom's creation possible. The experiment subject becomes the experiment's infrastructure. The participant becomes the mechanism. Across 30 years, Owen Reese's role evolves from player to engine, from pawn to foundation, from character to cosmos. And in both cases, his liberation is the key to the story's resolution. In 1985, freeing himself from the Beyonder's influence allows him to destroy the cosmic entity. In 2015, being freed by Reed Richards allows him to transfer power away from Doom and enable the multiverse's restoration. Molecule Man's freedom is always the pivot point. The moment when the person who was made to serve achieves autonomy and chooses what to do with it. That is the deepest theme of Secret Wars, across all its incarnations. Not power, not desire, not even the Doom-Richards rivalry, as central as that is. The deepest theme is agency. Who gets to choose? Who is used by others and who acts for themselves? The Beyonder used everyone on Battleworld as experimental subjects. Doom used Molecule Man as a battery. The Beyonders used the Molecule Men as bombs. And in every case, the story resolves when the used person reclaims their agency, when the tool becomes a person again, when the object of someone else's plan becomes the subject of their own. Spider-Man's symbiote is an object that becomes a subject, a costume that becomes a character, a tool that develops its own needs and desires and agenda. The Thing, made into a wall, reclaims his identity and his body. The citizens of Battleworld, stripped of their memories, are given back their true histories when the multiverse is restored. Even Doom, in the final analysis, is freed from his own godhood, freed from the weight of omnipotence that he could sustain but never enjoy, given back his scars, healed, given back his mortality, given back the possibility of change. Secret Wars is, ultimately, a story about liberation, about the progressive freeing of beings who have been trapped, used, controlled, or constrained by powers greater than themselves. And the final act of liberation is always the same, the powerful person choosing to give up power. Reed Richards giving the Beyonders energy to the multiverse rather than keeping it. Molecule Man choosing to distribute his power rather than hoarding it. Even the Beyonder of 1984, in the original story's conclusion, choosing to return to his dimension rather than continue his experiment. The powerful choosing limitation, the omnipotent choosing to become finite again. That choice, the choice of self-limitation, is presented as the highest possible moral act in the Secret Wars mythology, greater than heroism, greater than sacrifice, greater than any battle or victory. The willingness to have power and give it up. The willingness to be God and choose to stop. That is what separates Reed Richards from Victor Von Doom. Not that Reed is more powerful, not that Reed is better, but that Reed, given everything, would choose to return to being a person, and Doom, given everything, could not. There is one more element of the 1984 Secret Wars that requires attention before we close this section. The Enchantress. Amora of Asgard, placed among the villains, operating with her own agenda throughout. She is the only villain on Battleworld who serves no one else's plan. Not Doom's, not the Beyonders. She works for herself, manipulating whoever is available, pursuing her own objectives with a clarity of self-interest that even Doom cannot match, because Doom is always partially motivated by ego rather than pure pragmatism. The Enchantress's presence among the villains raises an interesting question about the Beyonder's selection process. He chose participants based on their power and their alignment. Heroes on one side, villains on the other. But alignment is not fixed. Magneto, placed among the heroes, operates independently. The Enchantress, placed among the villains, serves no one. The Molecule Man, supposedly a villain, falls in love and questions his entire identity. The Beyonder's categories are too simple for the complexity of the beings he has gathered. This failure of categorization mirrors the Beyonder's larger failure of understanding. He cannot comprehend desire because he reduces it to a binary, want versus have. He cannot comprehend morality because he reduces it to a binary, hero versus villain. The richness of human experience, the way people contain contradictions, the way good people do terrible things, and terrible people show unexpected grace. These escape his understanding entirely. His experiment fails not because the heroes lose or the villains win, but because the categories he built the experiment around do not hold. The experiment fails because reality is more complex than any framework can contain, because people are not types, because desire is not a switch, because morality is not a team. The Beyonder wanted to understand the universe by simplifying it. And simplification, when applied to something as vast and contradictory as human existence, always fails. Always. That is the lesson of Battleworld in 1984. That is the lesson of Battleworld in 2015. That is the lesson of every attempt, by gods or editors or toy companies, to reduce the magnificent chaos of stories into neat, manageable categories. Secret Wars resists categorization. It is a toy commercial that became literature. It is a crossover event that became a character study. It is a cosmic spectacle that became an intimate confession. It is 3 separate stories told 30 years apart that function as a single, continuous exploration of one idea: what happens when absolute power meets the irreducible complexity of human existence. The answer, always, is that power breaks first. Complexity wins. The system cannot be simplified. The experiment cannot be controlled. The people refuse to stay in their categories. And the god on the throne, however powerful, however brilliant, however determined, eventually has to admit that the world is bigger than his understanding of it. Victor Von Doom admits it in a chamber beneath his own castle. He admits it to the face of the man he has hated for decades. He admits it because, at the end of everything, after achieving godhood and holding it for 8 years and building a world from the corpses of dead realities, he cannot sustain the lie that he is enough. He is not enough. He has never been enough. And the tragedy is not that he fails. The tragedy is that he succeeds for 8 years, and the success tastes like nothing. The throne he built is empty even when he sits on it. The world he made is hollow even when it functions perfectly, because it was always about him. And a world that is about one person is not a world at all. It is a mirror, and mirrors show you nothing but yourself. Reed Richards takes the power and looks outward. He looks at the void where the multiverse used to be, and he sees not a canvas for his own vision, but a space where other visions can exist, where other stories can be told, where other people can live their own lives by their own rules in their own realities. He does not impose order. He does not demand worship. He does not build a world that reflects his ego. He builds a multiverse that reflects the infinite diversity of existence itself. And then he walks into it, alongside his family, as an explorer rather than a ruler, as a student rather than a teacher, as someone who knows that understanding is never complete, that there is always more to learn, that the universe is always bigger than any single mind's comprehension of it. That humility, that willingness to be incomplete, that acceptance of limitation, even when limitation is no longer necessary. That is what Victor Von Doom cannot achieve. That is what the Beyonder could not achieve. That is what Secret Wars says. Across 3 decades and 3 events and hundreds of issues, the measure of a person is not what they do with infinite power. The measure of a person is whether they can accept being finite, whether they can find meaning in limitation, whether they can be a person in a universe of persons rather than a god in a universe of subjects. We are deep into this now, so thank you for being here. If you have not subscribed yet, this would be a lovely time. We have covered the architecture, we have covered the themes, we have covered the specific moments and the specific characters and the specific choices that make Secret Wars endure. But there is one more thing to say, one more observation that ties everything together. Secret Wars is a story about fathers and sons, about creation and inheritance, about what you build and who inherits it. The Beyonder creates Battleworld. He populates it with characters he has chosen. He gives them rules and watches what they do. He is, in every functional sense, a father to that world, an absent, incomprehensible, demanding father who creates a space and fills it with beings and expects them to perform according to his expectations. And when they do not, when they refuse his simple binary and insist on their own complexity, he does not know what to do. Dr. Doom creates Battleworld in 2015. He populates it with preserved fragments of dead realities. He gives them rules and watches what they do. He is, in every functional sense, a father to that world. A present, controlling, exacting father who builds a world for his children and then refuses to let them be anything other than what he designed them to be. His love, such as it is conditional. Obey and be protected. Disobey and be destroyed. Reed Richards inherits the power to create. He does not build Battleworld. He rebuilds the multiverse. He does not populate it with subjects. He restores it with independent beings. He is, in every functional sense, a father to that creation, but a different kind of father. The kind who builds a world and then lets it go. Who creates something and then trusts it to exist without his control. Who loves his creation enough to give it freedom rather than safety. And Franklin Richards, Reed's son, literally creates universes. His mutant power is reality manipulation on a cosmic scale. He works alongside his father to rebuild the multiverse after Battleworld falls, the son participating in the father's work, the next generation continuing what the previous one began, the inheritance not of power but of purpose, not of control but of creativity, not of thrones but of tools. The final image of the Richards family, traveling the multiverse together, building worlds, exploring existence, is an image of parenthood at its best. Not control, not authority, not the demand that the world match your vision, but the willingness to create and let go, to build and trust, to teach by exploring alongside rather than dictating from above. Doom has no children in 2015's Secret Wars. He has subjects. He has a family he assembled from the wreckage of reality, Sue Storm as his wife, Franklin and Valeria as his children, but they are not his. They are Reed's family, claimed by force, redefined by fiat, kept through lies, and even with infinite power, even with the ability to rewrite their memories and their loyalties, Doom cannot make them truly his, because family cannot be claimed, it can only be built, through love, through trust, through the willingness to be vulnerable, through everything Victor Von Doom cannot do. When the truth emerges, when Sue and Franklin and Valeria learn who they really are and who their true father is, Doom's claim on them dissolves instantly. 8 years of fabricated memory, 8 years of enforced devotion, 8 years of playing at being a family, undone in a moment by the simple truth of who they are. Lies cannot build families. Control cannot create love. And Doom, for all his power, for all his genius, for all his genuine desire to be a good father to children who were never his, cannot make it real. That is perhaps the cruelest thing Secret Wars reveals about Victor Von Doom. Not that he is a tyrant, not that he is a megalomaniac, but that he wants, genuinely and desperately wants, to be loved, to be a father, to be part of a family. And his inability to achieve this, his constitutional inability to love without controlling, to care without possessing, to connect without dominating, is the wound that no amount of cosmic power can heal. Reed Richards has a family because he built one through vulnerability and trust and the willingness to be wrong. Victor Von Doom does not have a family because he cannot stop trying to earn one through power and control. And the entire Secret Wars mythology, from 1984 to 2015, is the story of that difference playing out on a cosmic stage. The difference between building with love and building with power. The difference between creating something free and creating something owned. The difference between a father and a god. Let us return to the final battle of Secret Wars 2015 in its full detail, because the mechanics of that confrontation reveal as much as its emotional content. The assault on Doomstat is not a single attack. It is a coordinated multi-front operation designed by characters who understand that Doom's power, while vast, can be overwhelmed through simultaneous pressure. The strategy is simple. Create enough chaos that Doom must divide his attention, and while his attention is divided, get Reed Richards into the chamber beneath the castle where Molecule Man waits. Black Panther and Namor travel to the Deadlands, the domain beyond the shield where the Marvel zombies endlessly hunger. T'Challa, as the King of the Dead, uses his title and authority to convince the zombie hordes to follow him. Not through force, through legitimacy. The dead recognize their king, and their king points them toward Doom's stronghold. Simultaneously, other heroes organize in different domains. The siege courageous, a portal in the shield wall, opens. The zombie horde pours through, an army of the undead descending on Doom's civilization. Behind them come Black Panther and Namor. T'Challa wears the Infinity Gauntlet, assembled from stones gathered across Battleworld's domains. Namor carries his trident. They declare Doom's reign over. The battle is spectacular. T'Challa, empowered by the Infinity Stones, strikes Doom with enough force to transform him into hardened matter. Namor shatters the remains with his trident. For a moment, it appears that the god has fallen, but Doom reconstitutes himself. He reforms from his own corpse, his power too vast for even the Infinity Gauntlet to permanently overcome. He offers them mercy. He offers to rebuild Wakanda and Atlantis, the lost kingdoms of the two men attacking him. And they refuse, because mercy from a tyrant is not mercy, it is a bribe. And T'Challa and Namor, whatever their differences, whatever their history of conflict, understand that accepting Doom's gifts means accepting Doom's authority. Doom kills Namor, an energy blast that ends the Submariner's life. Namor, who survived the death of the multiverse, who survived the moral compromise of the Illuminati, who survived betraying and being betrayed by Black Panther, dies in the final battle, not as a hero or a villain, but as something more complicated than either. As a man who did terrible things for survival and then chose to fight for something beyond survival at the end. But the battle was always a distraction. Black Panther and Namor knew this. The zombie horde knew this. Everyone involved in the assault on Doomstat understood that they were not going to defeat a god through force. They were going to create an opening, and while Doom fought the Infinity Gauntlet and the zombie army and the Rage of Kings, Reed Richards found his way into the chamber below. And there, in that chamber, with Owen Reese watching from his prison, the real confrontation happened. Not with fists or energy blasts or cosmic powers, with words, with truth, with the question that has always been at the center of everything. The Ben Grimm revelation in Secret Wars 2015 deserves a moment of specific attention. The Thing, Reed Richards' best friend, has been transformed into something inhuman in the most literal sense. He is not merely large and rocky on Battleworld. He is the shield itself. His body, expanded to impossible proportions, forms a living section of the wall that separates Doom's ordered civilization from the chaos beyond. He does not know who he is. He does not remember Reed or Sue or Johnny. He does not remember being a person at all. He is a wall. That is his entire identity. When his memories return, when he remembers being Benjamin Grimm, the liberation is physical as well as psychological. He tears himself free from the shield. His body contracts back to its normal proportions. He is himself again. And the first thing he does, the very first thing, is join the fight against the man who did this to him. The parallel to the 1984 Secret Wars is deliberate. In the original event, the Thing discovered that Battleworld allowed him to shift between his rock form and his human form. It was a liberation, a gift. The planet that was supposed to be a prison gave him something he had wanted for years. The ability to be Ben Grimm again, with smooth skin and normal hands and a face that did not frighten children. He stayed on Battleworld specifically because of this gift. He chose the alien planet over Earth because Earth meant being trapped in his rock body forever. In 2015, Battleworld does the opposite. It takes the Thing and makes him more trapped than he has ever been. Not just rock, but architecture. Not just monstrous, but mindless. Not just ugly, but unconscious. The planet that once freed him now imprisons him more completely than any villain ever could. And the man responsible is Victor Von Doom, who in 1984 was a rival, and in 2015 is a god who uses people as building materials. The progression from 1984 to 2015, for the Thing specifically, is a progression from liberation to enslavement. From a battle world that offers possibilities to a battle world that eliminates them. From a cosmic event that gives a character something he never had, to a cosmic event that takes away everything he is. The same character, the same setting, inverted completely, and the inversion tells you everything about the difference between the Beyonders' Battleworld and Doom's Battleworld. One was an experiment, the other was a regime. One offered choices, however manipulated, the other eliminated choice entirely. There is a moment in the 1984 Secret Wars, issue 12, where Captain America repairs his shattered shield through sheer force of will. The Beyonders' power, dissipating through Battleworld after being reclaimed from Doom, creates a kind of wish fulfillment effect. The hero's desires become real, and Steve Rogers, holding the pieces of his broken shield, wills them back together. Not through technology, not through cosmic energy directed by his hands, through belief. Through the absolute, unshakable conviction that this symbol matters, that it cannot be permanently broken, that what it represents is stronger than any force that tried to destroy it. This is, in narrative terms, the most Captain America moment possible. Steve Rogers does not have cosmic powers. He does not have genius intellect. He does not have the ability to reshape reality through force of will in any normal circumstance. But on Battleworld, in the aftermath of a god's power dispersing through reality, his belief is enough. His certainty that the shield should be whole makes the shield whole. Because Steve Rogers' certainty is not ordinary certainty. It is the most powerful force in the Marvel Universe that does not require cosmic enhancement. It is the power of absolute moral conviction. And in this one moment, on this one world, that conviction becomes literally reality-shaping. Compare this to Doom's use of the same power. Doom steals the Beyonders' omnipotence and uses it to kill and resurrect the heroes, to reshape Battleworld according to his whims, to prove his superiority. The power, in Doom's hands, is a tool of ego. In Steve Rogers' hands, the same power is a tool of restoration. Doom destroys and remakes according to his vision. Rogers restores what was broken. Same power. Same source, completely different application, and the difference is the person wielding it. The difference is always the person. That is why Secret Wars keeps returning to the same question across 3 decades. Not who is most powerful, but who uses power best. Not who deserves godhood, but what does your use of godhood reveal about who you are. Every character in Secret Wars who touches cosmic power is revealed by it. The power does not change them, it magnifies what was already there. Doom's megalomania becomes literal world building. Reed's curiosity becomes literal universe creation. Cap's conviction becomes literal shield restoration. The power is a mirror. It shows you what you are at your most fundamental, and what you are determines what the power becomes. Spider-Man's symbiote is perhaps the most disturbing version of this principle. Peter Parker approaches the machine on Battleworld wanting new clothes. That is all. He is tired and his costume is damaged and he wants to look presentable. The desire is so mundane, so human, so completely ordinary that it should produce nothing more significant than a change of wardrobe. And instead it produces one of the most dangerous organisms in the Marvel Universe. A living creature that bonds with its host, amplifies their aggression, feeds on their darker impulses, and ultimately becomes one of Spider-Man's most persistent enemies. The symbiote is what happens when desire meets alien technology without understanding. Peter did not know what the machine was. He did not know what the black substance was. He did not know that his simple wish for new clothes would produce something alive, something hungry, something that would spend years trying to possess him and, failing that, would bond with Eddie Brock and become Venom. The innocence of his desire does not protect him from the consequences of what it produces. There is a reading of this that connects to the larger Secret Wars mythology. The Beyonder created Battleworld to understand desire. He placed alien technology throughout the planet, technology that could respond to desire, that could give people what they wanted. And the first time a hero uses that technology, the first time someone expresses a desire and lets the alien machine fulfill it, the result is a monster. Not because the desire was evil, not because Spider-Man wanted something wrong, but because desire fulfilled without understanding is dangerous. Because getting what you want, when you do not understand the mechanism that provides it, produces consequences you cannot predict or control. That is the Beyonder's mistake writ small. He gives people what they want and expects understanding to follow. But understanding does not follow satisfaction. Understanding follows effort, follows struggle, follows the process of wanting and working and failing and trying again. The shortcut, the machine that gives you what you want without requiring you to understand what you are getting, produces symbiotes, produces monsters, produces consequences that haunt you for decades. Doom makes the same mistake on a cosmic scale. He takes the Beyonder's power and gives the people of Battleworld a world, stability, order, safety. He gives them what they want without requiring them to understand what it costs. And the result, like the symbiote, is something that looks good on the surface, but conceals a hungry, parasitic truth beneath. Battleworld is the symbiote costume of reality, sleek and responsive and empowering on the outside, alive and hungry and enslaving on the inside. The cultural impact of Secret Wars extends far beyond the comic book industry. The 1984 event was, by most accounts, the first modern crossover event in superhero comics. Its structure, a dedicated miniseries tying into multiple ongoing titles, with changes to the status quo that persisted after the event concluded, became the template for every subsequent event from both Marvel and DC. Crisis on Infinite Earths at DC, published in 1985, followed a similar structure but with even more ambitious scope, literally rewriting DC's entire continuity. The two events together established event comics as the dominant commercial strategy of the superhero industry. But Secret Wars 1984 was first. It sold more copies than virtually any comic in the previous 25 years. It demonstrated that the crossover event could be the most commercially successful format in the medium, and in doing so, it permanently changed how superhero comics were created and sold. For better and for worse. For better because it proved that ambitious, large-scale storytelling could find an audience. For worse because it created an annual arms race of escalation, each event needing to be bigger and more consequential than the last, each one promising changes that would increasingly be reversed within a year. By 2015, event fatigue was real. Readers had been told that nothing will ever be the same so many times that the phrase had become a joke. The promise of consequences had been broken so often that no one believed it anymore. And into that environment, Hickman's Secret Wars arrived and somehow made the promise feel genuine again. Not because it was bigger, not because it killed more characters or destroyed more worlds, but because it earned its consequences. Because the 3 years of buildup meant that the destruction of the multiverse was not arbitrary but inevitable. Because the restoration at the end was not a reset button, but a genuine rebirth. Because things actually changed. Miles Morales permanently joined the main Marvel universe. The Ultimate Universe ended. The Richards family left Earth to explore the multiverse. Doom's face was healed. These were not temporary status quo changes to be reversed in 6 months. These were genuine narrative progressions that persisted for years and, in some cases, permanently. The event that people thought would be just another summer crossover turned out to be a genuine turning point, not because of marketing promises, but because of storytelling craft. The difference between a meaningful event and a forgettable one is not scale. It is setup. It is the work done before the event begins to make the stakes feel real. Secret Wars 2015 had 3 years of setup, 3 years of watching good men make terrible choices, 3 years of watching relationships fracture and principles erode and hope diminish. By the time the multiverse ended, the reader had lived through the dying, had felt it, had grieved it, and the restoration, when it came, felt like relief rather than routine. That is the lesson of Secret Wars, not just as a story, but as a model for storytelling. Consequences matter, but consequences only matter if they are earned, if the reader has invested in what is being lost, if the destruction means something beyond spectacle, if the restoration addresses something beyond plot. The best event comics are not the biggest. They are the most emotionally specific. They are the ones where you remember not the cosmic battles, but the quiet moments, not the spectacle, but the confession, not the god on the throne, but the man beneath the armor, admitting what he has always known. There is one more aspect of the original 1984 Secret Wars that deserves attention: the way it changed how Marvel told stories across its entire publishing line. Before Secret Wars, continuity between titles was relatively loose. Characters would reference events in other books, crossovers would occur in 2 or 3 titles simultaneously, but the idea of a single event affecting every book Marvel published at the same time was unprecedented. Secret Wars changed that. During the 12 months the series ran, characters in their regular titles would simply disappear and then return, changed. The ongoing books would feature a note, "See what happened in Secret Wars." Readers of Amazing Spider-Man saw Peter Parker vanish and return wearing a mysterious black costume. Readers of Fantastic Four saw the Thing stay behind on an alien world and She-Hulk take his place. Readers of Uncanny X-Men saw Colossus return emotionally shattered, his relationship with Kitty destroyed. The regular titles told the before and after. Only the Secret Wars miniseries itself told the during. This created a new commercial dynamic. Readers who only followed 1 or 2 titles were suddenly confronted with major changes to their favorite characters that could only be explained by purchasing a separate 12-issue series. It was, in blunt commercial terms, a forced upsell. Buy Secret Wars or be confused by your regular books. This strategy was controversial among fans and critics, but it was undeniably effective commercially, and it became the standard operating procedure for every subsequent crossover event in superhero comics. The artistic consequence of this structure was equally significant. It meant that the regular titles had to accommodate changes decided in the event book. Writers working on Amazing Spider-Man had to incorporate the black costume whether they wanted to or not. Writers working on Fantastic Four had to work without the Thing for an extended period. The event became a top-down creative mandate that overrode the autonomy of individual creative teams. This tension between event books and ongoing series, between company-wide narratives and individual creative visions, remains one of the central conflicts of superhero comics publishing to this day. Hickman's approach to Secret Wars 2015 was a deliberate response to this tension. Rather than imposing his event on other writers' books from above, he built his event from within the books he already controlled. Avengers and New Avengers were his books. The Incursions were his plot. The Illuminati were his characters. When Secret Wars arrived, it was not a disruption of ongoing narratives. It was the conclusion of one. The event did not interrupt other stories. It replaced them entirely, with all Marvel titles ending and relaunching in the aftermath. The approach was more respectful to the medium's ongoing nature precisely because it was more radical. Instead of forcing other books to accommodate his event, Hickman simply ended all the books and started fresh afterward. The all-new, all-different Marvel initiative that followed Secret Wars represented a genuine creative reset. New number ones, new creative teams, new status quos. The Richards family gone from Earth. Miles Morales integrated into the main universe. Old Man Logan transplanted from his post-apocalyptic future. The X-Men and Inhumans in new configurations. It was not a reboot in the DC sense. Continuity was preserved, but it was a renewal, a fresh start enabled by the event's willingness to actually end things rather than merely disrupting them. This is perhaps the most important difference between Secret Wars 1984 and Secret Wars 2015. The 1984 event changed things temporarily. The black costume was eventually removed. The Thing eventually came home. Colossus eventually reconciled with Kitty. Sort of. The changes were significant but reversible, and most were reversed within a year or two. The 2015 event changed things permanently. The Ultimate Universe is still gone. Miles Morales is still in Earth 616. The Richards family was absent from Marvel Comics for years. The event had genuine, lasting consequences because it was designed from the start to be a conclusion rather than an interruption. That distinction, conclusion versus interruption, is the key to understanding why the 2015 Secret Wars resonates in a way that most event comics do not. It was not a detour from the ongoing narrative. It was the destination the narrative had been traveling toward for 3 years. It was not a disruption of the status quo. It was the natural end of a status quo that had been systematically dismantled across dozens of issues. It was not a promise that things would change. It was the moment when they already had, when the change was already complete, when all that remained was to acknowledge it and begin again. There is a thread running through Secret Wars that we have not yet named directly, the thread of sacrifice. Specifically, the question of what constitutes meaningful sacrifice versus performative sacrifice. Because Secret Wars, across all its incarnations, is populated by characters who give things up, and the mythology draws clear distinctions between sacrifices that matter and sacrifices that are merely impressive. The heroes on Battleworld in 1984 risk their lives in every battle. That is sacrifice. They face enemies that could kill them, on a planet far from home, in a conflict they did not choose. Their physical courage is real. Their willingness to fight and potentially die is genuine, but it is also expected. It is what heroes do. It does not cost them anything beyond what heroism has always cost them. Dr. Doom sacrifices differently. He sacrifices his body, allowing the Beyonder to reduce him to atoms, as part of his plan to steal omnipotence. He is willing to die, or at least to come as close to death as a mortal can, while still retaining the chance of return, in pursuit of his goal. That is impressive. It requires extraordinary will and enormous pain tolerance, and a degree of self-belief that borders on insanity. But it is not selfless. It is the ultimate selfish act disguised as courage. He risks himself for himself. He suffers for his own aggrandizement. The sacrifice is real in a physical sense and hollow in a moral sense. Zeiji's sacrifice, by contrast, is genuinely selfless. The alien healer on Battleworld who gives her life force to resurrect fallen heroes, who literally dies so that others might live, who has no agenda, no plan, no desire for power or recognition, who simply heals because healing is what she does, and who gives everything because everything is what is needed. Her sacrifice is barely noticed by the narrative. It is a subplot, a minor beat in a story about cosmic powers and godlike beings. And yet it is the purest act in the entire 12 issues, the only sacrifice that asks for nothing in return. In 2015, the sacrifices are more complex. Doctor Strange sacrifices his freedom, spending 8 years as Doom's sheriff, legitimizing tyranny through his service, because the alternative was non-existence. His sacrifice is not death, it is complicity. He gives up his moral purity to preserve some sliver of reality. He serves a tyrant so that something, anything, continues to exist. And when he finally refuses, when he finally says no, when he finally prioritizes principle over survival, Doom kills him. The sacrifice of his freedom was accepted. The sacrifice of his compliance was not. Molecule Man sacrifices 8 years of his existence to pain, 8 years of being a battery, 8 years of agony in service of a world he did not build and a God he did not choose. His sacrifice is the foundation upon which all of Battleworld rests. Without his suffering, without his continuous channeling of the Beyonder's power, reality itself would cease. He is Atlas. He holds the world. And unlike Atlas, no one acknowledges it. No one thanks him. No one offers him relief or company or comfort. Until Miles Morales brings him a hamburger. That small act, that gesture so minor it barely registers as sacrifice at all, a teenager giving food to a hungry man, is the act that ultimately saves the universe. Not the cosmic battles, not the Infinity Gauntlet, not the Phoenix Force. A hamburger, given freely, without expectation of reward, without even full understanding of who the recipient was or why his gratitude would matter. The mythology is clear about what it values. It does not value impressive sacrifice. Doom's willingness to endure pain for power is impressive but meaningless. It does not value obligatory sacrifice. The hero's willingness to fight is admirable but expected. What the mythology values is quiet sacrifice, unnoticed sacrifice. Sacrifice performed without audience, without recognition, without the awareness that what you are giving up matters on a cosmic scale. Miles Morales does not know he is saving the universe when he offers food to a hungry man. Zsaji does not know she is completing one of the purest moral acts in the story when she heals strangers. The power of their sacrifice comes precisely from its lack of self-awareness, from its simplicity, from its humanity. That is the final statement of Secret Wars, woven through both versions, running beneath all the cosmic spectacle and philosophical conversation and emotional confrontation. The thing that saves the universe is never the biggest thing. It is never the most powerful thing. It is never the most dramatic thing. It is the kindest thing, the most human thing, the thing done without calculation, without strategy, without the awareness that it matters. A hamburger given to a hungry man, a healer touching a wounded stranger, a moment of ordinary decency in a context of extraordinary cosmic chaos. Power does not save anything. Power builds and destroys and builds again, endlessly, achieving nothing permanent. Kindness saves things. Small, unnoticed, unremarkable kindness. And Secret Wars, for all its scale, for all its ambition, for all its cosmic grandeur, knows this, has always known this. From 1984 to 2015, from a toy commercial to an epic, the smallest act outweighs the greatest power. Every time. There is something else worth exploring. The women of Secret Wars. Because across both the 1984 and 2015 events, the women characters occupy specific narrative positions that reveal much about the eras in which they were written and about the mythology's evolving understanding of power and agency. In 1984, the women present are She-Hulk, the Wasp, Storm, Rogue, Captain Marvel in her Monica Rambeau incarnation, and the newly created Titania and Volcana. The Enchantress operates among the villains. Spider-Woman, Julia Carpenter, makes her first appearance later in the series. Their roles are, by the standards of 1984 superhero comics, relatively progressive. She-Hulk fights alongside the male heroes without being diminished. Storm remains a leader among the X-Men. Captain Marvel exercises her powers fully, but they are also, inescapably, secondary to the primary narrative, which is about Doom, the Beyonder, Captain America, and the male characters' conflicts. The Wasp's subplot with Magneto is particularly interesting in retrospect. She is captured by Magneto, held in his fortress, and rather than remaining a helpless hostage, she engages with him intellectually and emotionally. They are attracted to each other. They kiss. This was, for 1984, a surprisingly complex choice. The Wasp is not victimized by her captivity. She exercises agency within it. She chooses engagement over resistance because engagement serves her better. But the framing still positions her primarily in relation to a male character's story, her narrative significance defined by her proximity to Magneto rather than by independent action. Volcana's love story with Molecule Man is gentler, more genuinely romantic, and ultimately more significant to the mythology. Their relationship humanizes Molecule Man in ways that years of supervillain activity never could. It gives him something to care about beyond power. It provides the emotional foundation for his gradual reformation, which will culminate decades later in his role as the universe's foundation in 2015. Volcana does not know she is doing this. She is simply loving someone. But that simple act of love becomes retroactively one of the most important things that happens in the entire 1984 event. Because without Molecule Man's humanization, without his discovery that he can be loved, the character who holds the 2015 multiverse together, might never have existed. In 2015, the women of Secret Wars occupy a different position. Sue Storm is Doom's wife on Battleworld, taken from Reed through Doom's rewriting of reality. She does not know her true history. She does not remember Reed. She believes she has always been with Victor. And yet there are moments, small moments, where something feels wrong to her, where her constructed devotion to Doom does not quite fit, where the edges of the lie are visible, if only barely. Her liberation, when it comes, is not dramatic. It is not a battle scene or a revelation. It is simply the restoration of truth. She remembers, she knows, and in knowing, she is free. The subtlety of this is important. Sue Storm does not need to fight her way out of captivity. She does not need a rescue. She needs truth. And truth, in Secret Wars, is always the most powerful weapon available. More powerful than the Infinity Gauntlet. More powerful than the Phoenix Force. More powerful than Doom's stolen omnipotence. Truth dissolves lies simply by existing, and Doom's entire world is a lie. Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers in 2015, rather than Monica Rambeau, as in 1984, is among the survivors on the life raft. Her presence establishes continuity between the old universe and the new one. She fights in the final assault. She does not get the climactic confrontation. That belongs to Reed and Doom. But her presence matters because she is a witness. She remembers what was. She can testify to the truth of the old multiverse. In a story where memory is power, where knowing the truth is the first step toward freedom, her unaltered memories are themselves a weapon against Doom's constructed reality. The Black Swan is perhaps the most complex female character in the 2015 mythology. A woman from a destroyed universe who attached herself to the Cabal, who understood the Incursions before anyone else, who played every faction against each other with a clarity of purpose that rivaled Doom's. She is neither hero nor villain. She is a survivor, and her survival strategy, allying with whoever offers the best chance of continued existence regardless of morality, is the most honest response to the end of everything that any character in the story demonstrates. There is a scene in Secret Wars 2015, Issue 5, that most analysis passes over quickly, but that contains, in miniature, the entire emotional argument of the event. It is the funeral of Stephen Strange. Doom presides. The citizens of Doomstadt gather. The Thors stand in formation. Everyone mourns the sheriff. And no one knows the truth. No one knows that Doom killed him. No one knows that Strange died because he told his god the truth about himself. The funeral is a performance. A lie performed for an audience that does not know it is being lied to. And Doom stands at its center, receiving the grief of his subjects for a death he caused, accepting their sympathy for a loss he inflicted. The hypocrisy is total. And yet Doom grieves. The comic shows it. In the quiet of his private chambers, away from the public performance, Doom feels the loss. He is diminished by Strange's absence. He is less stable without his sheriff. The Molecule Man tells him so directly. Killing Strange started an unraveling. The one person who legitimized Doom's rule, the one person whose willing service proved that Doom's world was not merely tyranny, is gone, and Doom killed him. Because Strange told the truth. Because the truth was intolerable. This is a man who would rather be alone and falsely mourned than honestly challenged. Who would rather kill his friend than hear his friend say, "You are afraid"? Who would rather destroy the one relationship that gave his godhood meaning than confront the insecurity that relationship exposed? That is not strength. That is not power. That is the most devastating weakness imaginable. The inability to be told the truth by someone who cares about you. The inability to accept honesty from someone whose opinion matters. Doom is not a monster. He is something worse. He is a person of enormous capability and genuine feeling who has built an identity so rigid, so dependent on superiority, so incapable of accepting imperfection, that he destroys everything that could save him, every relationship, every friendship, every connection, destroyed not by his enemies but by his own refusal to be vulnerable, his own insistence on being God even when being God means being alone. That is the tragedy. Not cosmic, human, achingly, devastatingly human. The man who has everything except the one thing that would make everything meaningful. Connection, honesty, the willingness to be seen as you are rather than as you wish to be. Victor Von Doom would rather rule a fake universe alone than exist in a real one as a flawed person among other flawed people. And that choice, that absolute preference for lonely perfection over messy connection, is what makes him a villain. Not his ambition, not his methods, not his willingness to do terrible things, his unwillingness to be ordinary, his absolute pathological refusal to be one person among many. That is his villainy. Everything else is symptom. And Secret Wars in every incarnation is the story of that villainy being tested, being pushed to its absolute limit, being given everything it asks for and revealed, in the having, to be empty. Doom gets what he wants. He always gets what he wants. And getting what he wants is always the punishment. Because what he wants is not what he needs. What he wants is power and recognition and superiority. What he needs is connection and vulnerability and the acceptance of his own limitation. And the gap between wanting and needing, between what he pursues and what would actually save him, is the gap that Secret Wars lives inside. There is a version of Victor Von Doom that could have been Reed Richards' best friend. A version where the accident that scarred his face led to humility rather than rage. A version where his brilliance served curiosity rather than ego. A version where he met Reed as an equal and chose collaboration over competition. The mythology never shows you that version directly, but it implies it. Every time Doom and Reed face each other, every time the rivalry flares, every time Doom's rage at Richards' existence surfaces, the ghost of that other Doom is present. The one who might have been, the one who chose differently, the one who lives only in the gap between what Doom is and what Doom could have been. That gap is Secret Wars. That is where the story lives, in the space between potential and reality, between what power could achieve and what power actually achieves when wielded by someone too damaged to use it well, between the god Victor Von Doom becomes and the person Victor Von Doom could have been, between the world he builds and the world he could have built if he were capable of building for anyone other than himself. The story lands. It always lands. No matter which version you read, no matter which era you enter the mythology through, it lands on the same truth. Quiet and devastating and simple enough for a child to understand, and complex enough to sustain 3 decades of exploration. You cannot be everything to everyone. You cannot control what you love. You cannot own what you create. You cannot be God and still be human. And the attempt, however magnificent, however brilliant, however sincere, will always end the same way, in a dark room, with an honest question, and an answer you have always known but could never bring yourself to speak. Could he have done it better? Yes. Let that sit for a moment. Let that single word carry the weight of 30 years of stories. Let it carry the weight of 12 issues on an alien planet in 1984. Let it carry the weight of 9 issues on a patchwork world in 2015. Let it carry the weight of every battle fought, every power stolen, every world built and destroyed and rebuilt. One word, one admission, one truth that Victor Von Doom has spent his entire existence trying to disprove and cannot. Yes. Reed Richards would have done better. And the fact that Doom can say it, the fact that he can admit it at the end of everything, is perhaps the most heroic thing he has ever done. Because admitting your own inadequacy when you are God requires more courage than stealing godhood ever did. There is a strange grace in that admission, a strange beauty. Doom, who has defined himself by his refusal to acknowledge any superior, who has built his entire identity around the certainty that he is the greatest mind in existence, who has fought and schemed and killed for decades to prove that he is better than Reed Richards, finally stops, finally says the true thing, finally lets the fiction collapse. And in that collapse, in that moment of absolute honesty, he is more admirable than he has ever been in his life, more human than godhood ever allowed him to be, more real than Battleworld ever was. The Molecule Man hears that admission and knows what to do. He does not punish Doom, he does not gloat. He simply transfers the power to the person Doom himself identified as more worthy. It is not a theft, it is not a coup, it is an acknowledgement, a recognition, a confirmation of what everyone, including Doom, already knew. The power goes where it belongs, not because Richards took it, because Doom gave it. Because in the final analysis, at the bottom of everything, Victor Von Doom chose truth over pride. And that choice, that single moment of choosing correctly, is the only redemption the story offers him. It is not enough to erase what he did. 8 years of tyranny, a stolen family, a murdered friend, a world built on lies and maintained through suffering. These cannot be undone by one honest sentence. But they can be met by one honest sentence. The admission does not fix anything. It does not restore anything. It simply acknowledges reality. And in Secret Wars, acknowledging reality is the beginning of everything. The first step. The foundation upon which whatever comes next can be built. Doom will go on. He will scheme again. He will reach for power again. He will probably find new ways to fail at the same fundamental challenge, being a person among people rather than a god above subjects. But he will do it with the knowledge that he once, at the very end of everything, told the truth. He once admitted what he knew. He once chose honesty over performance. And that moment, however brief, however insufficient, however unlikely to prevent future transgressions, exists. It happened. It is real in a way that Battleworld never was. And that is Secret Wars. From a toy commercial in 1984 to a cosmic epic in 2015. From the Beyonder's incomprehensible curiosity to Doom's devastating admission. From a planet built for an experiment to a planet built for a man's ego. From the first crossover event ever published to the most emotionally resonant one ever completed. 30 years, 3 events, 1 truth. The measure of what you build is not how powerful it makes you. It is how free it makes the people within it. And the man who understands that, the man who builds worlds and lets them go, the man who creates and then explores rather than creates and then controls, that is the man who deserves the power, not because he earned it, but because he does not need it, because he would give it back, because he already has what matters, a family, a purpose, a universe to explore with the people he loves. Victor Von Doom has none of those things. He has power, and he has rage, and he has brilliance, and he has an empty throne in a world that no longer exists. And somewhere in the restored multiverse, he wakes up with a healed face and has to decide what that means. Whether forgiveness is a gift or a punishment, whether he can be someone new, or whether he is trapped forever in the cycle of reaching and failing and reaching again. That question, Doom's question, remains open. It will remain open as long as Marvel publishes comics, because some questions are not meant to be answered. They are meant to be lived with, carried, examined from every angle across decades of stories. The question of whether Victor Von Doom can change is the question of whether any of us can change. Whether the patterns we have established, the cages we have built around ourselves, the identities we have constructed from our wounds, are permanent or temporary. Whether we are fixed or fluid. Whether the worst version of ourselves is the true version or just one version among many possible ones. Secret Wars does not answer that question. It holds it up to the light. It turns it slowly. It shows you every facet, and then it lets you decide. But here is what it does tell you. What it states plainly. Through 30 years of stories and 3 separate events and hundreds of characters and millions of words, it tells you that the attempt matters. That reaching for something better, even when you fail repeatedly, even when your failure is spectacular and public and devastating, the reaching itself has value. Doom reaches. He reaches wrong, for the wrong reasons, in the wrong direction, but he reaches. And the story does not condemn him for reaching. It condemns him only for what he does once he arrives. For hoarding rather than sharing, for controlling rather than freeing, for building for himself rather than for others. The reaching is not the sin. The keeping is the sin. And maybe that is the most important thing Secret Wars has to say. Not about power, not about heroism, not about the nature of gods or the architecture of multiverses, but about what you do when you get what you wanted. About whether you hold on or let go. About whether a rival is a beginning or an ending. About whether the top of the mountain is a place to plant your flag or a place to look out and see how much further there is to go. Reed Richards reaches the top and looks out. Victor Von Doom reaches the top and plants his flag. And that difference, that single difference in orientation, in attention, in where you look when you finally arrive, is the difference between a hero and a villain, between a god worth worshipping and a tyrant worth overthrowing, between a world worth living in and a world worth escaping. Secret Wars shows you both. It does not simplify. It does not moralize. It does not pretend that the answer is easy or the question is straightforward, but it shows you both paths clearly enough that you can choose. And the choice, as it always is in the best stories, as it always is in life, is yours. So here we are, at the end of this long, quiet trip through the entire Secret Wars. From its origin in a toy company's focus group data to its conclusion in a chamber beneath a false god's castle. From the Beyonder's first word, slay your enemies and all that you desire shall be yours, to Doom's last word, the quiet, devastating yes that undoes everything he built. From a 12-issue limited series that changed how comics were sold to a 9-issue limited series that changed how comics were felt. 30 years, 3 events, 1 mythology, and at its center, always, the same question, asked by different characters in different circumstances, but always arriving at the same answer. What would you do with everything? And the answer, the only answer that the story accepts, the only answer that leads anywhere worth going, you would give it away. You would share it. You would use it to make others free rather than making yourself great. You would choose exploration over dominion, connection over control, love over power. That is Secret Wars, the whole of it. Every version, every era, every Battleworld and every Beyonder, and every moment where a mortal looked at a god and said, I can do that. I can be that. Give me the chance and I will prove it. And if you have stayed with us through this entire journey, through every issue and every incarnation and every version of Battleworld, then you already knew this. You already felt it. The story told you before we did. It always does. The best stories always do. Quietly, patiently, completely. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.